If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Oh, whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it is midday and you're watching the live desk here on GB News. Coming up this Tuesday lunchtime.
UNICEF calling for a humanitarian corridor as the death toll in Gaza continues to rise. The Palestinian Health Authority saying 770 people have died along the strip, with the Israeli Air Force saying they launched another 200 airstrikes overnight. In Israel, officials say at least 900 people have been killed there.
A decade of national renewal. Sir Keir Starmer addresses the Labour conference this afternoon as he sets his sight on Downing Street. He's expected to promise a new generation of new towns and suburbs, but does everyone want them? We're live in Liverpool.
And the Home Office announces that they will return asylum seekers to the Bibby Stockholm barge in Portland as early as next week after the lengthy Legionnaire's disease delay.
And as Scotland recovers from widespread flooding, another 33 warnings and 10 flood alerts are put in place across much of the country. We're live in Perth, one of the worst hit areas. Here's your headlines now with Aaron.
It is 1 minute past 12. Good afternoon to you. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB Newsroom. Almost 200,000 people are fleeing their homes in Gaza as Israel continues to launch hundreds of airstrikes on Hamas terrorists. Supplies of water, food and electricity to Gaza have been cut off as the conflict enters its fourth day. Its health ministry says at least 770 Palestinians have been killed and 4,000 injured since Saturday. Hamas has threatened to kill an Israeli hostage for every unannounced airstrike. Israel's Defence Force has confirmed it's retaken control of the Gaza border fence stormed by Hamas gunmen at the weekend, which left at least 900 people dead. Additionally, it says the bodies of 1,500 Hamas militants have been found on Israeli territory. And we can take you live now to Gaza, where the Israeli Air Force say they are carrying out waves of intensive airstrikes on Hamas targets every 4 hours. The UN says schools, apartment blocks and a mosque have been hit and has called for a humanitarian corridor. Israeli forces are gathering near the border ahead of an expected major ground offensive. In a bid to shore up support, Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition has in the last few moments approved the formation of a unity government to include opposition politicians. Earlier, the Prime Minister described Hamas fighters as savages akin to the ISIS terror group.
We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it. Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come.
Well, meanwhile, Iran says it was not involved in the attack on Israel at the weekend, but says it kissed the hands of those that planned it. In a televised speech, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei hailed what he called the irreparable military and intelligence defeat. He says the Israeli regime's own actions are to blame for the disaster. The leaders of France, Germany, Italy, the United States and the UK issued a joint statement last night. They offered their united support for Israel and condemned Hamas for what they described as appalling acts of terrorism. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says the UK is ready to support its citizens.
Completely understand that there'll be many people who are very, very concerned about family, about loved ones who are in Israel. A very large proportion of the British nationals in Israel will be dual nationals who regard Israel as their permanent home, may even be serving with the Israeli Defense Forces. But anyone that is concerned should get in contact with the department. The contact details are available on our website, and we will, of course, provide support to any family who requests that of us.
Former Labour Minister Lord Mandelson says Sir Keir Starmer is no Tony Blair, but he is in touch with people. In a spontaneous discussion at the Labour Party conference, he told GB News what he thinks of the Labour leader.
Keir Starmer is not Tony Blair, but I said something else. He's the nearest thing to Tony Blair of any leader of the Labour Party since Blair.
Right.
He's a mainstream politician, you know. He's completely in touch with and connected with what people are thinking in the country. He's totally committed to restarting the economy, and he's not wobbly on defence and national security.
The government says it's now safe for asylum seekers to return to the Bibi Stockholm barge, but they haven't set a date yet. It's been vacant since August following an outbreak of Legionella, but a Dorset resident is set to challenge the Home Office in court over using the barge. Carolyn Parks, who lives on the Isle of Portland and is also the mayor, believes the government needs planning permission to use the barge in Portland Port. The government will spend nearly £200 million to attract more teachers into the profession. The money will be used to fund scholarships, bursaries and salary grants. Scholarships for those training to teach maths, physics, chemistry and computing will be brought up to £30,000 tax-free. It's after teaching unions warned of a deepening recruitment and retention crisis. And the UK and Ireland have been confirmed as the hosts for Euro 2028. The joint bid was the only one remaining following Turkey's withdrawal. They're focusing on a bid alongside Italy for Euro 2032. Now, 6 of the venues are in England, with 1 each in Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, Scotland and Wales. 2 spots have been reserved should any of the 5 hosts not qualify, although England have requested to go through the qualification process. This is GB News on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker too. That's it for the moment. Now back to Mark and Pip.
Aaron, thank you and welcome back to the live desk with the latest reports from Israel saying the death toll from the various attacks in Israel itself climbing to more than 900 people, mostly those civilians gunned down in their own homes, on streets or at the Kibbutz Music Festival.
Scores of Israelis were taken to Gaza as hostages, with Hamas now threatening to kill 1 captive for every Palestinian home that is bombed without warning. Among the families believed to be held captive is this mother and her 2 young sons. This is believed to be the moments when they were taken. According to Palestinian Health Ministry officials, some 770 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza so far, with whole districts flattened.
Well, the United Nations says 180,000 people in Gaza having been made homeless, with growing calls now for a humanitarian corridor with Egypt, the Rafah crossing, to be reopened. Indeed, the UN's human rights chief, Volker Turk, has gone further, declaring Israel's siege to be illegal under international law.
Iran's supreme leader has denied they were directly involved in the attacks on Israel, but has praised the Hamas fighters who carried them out.
Well, let's get the very latest now from Tel Aviv, and we can speak to Israeli journalist Yotam Confino. Yotam, thank you for your time there. First to the political situation there, with this suggestion of a coalition or a unity government. How is that likely to change the political landscape, bearing in mind that we've got Hamas suggesting that it will not negotiate on the hostages until the fighting is over?
Well, first of all, it will bring in much more responsible people from the center of the political landscape, former defense ministers, former military generals, people who actually know what they're talking about. Netanyahu's government right now consists of several far-right extremists who have no military background, never served in the army, yet they are at the security cabinet And they are very extreme, some of them. And they are basically, some of them, first of all, refusing Palestinians to have a state. That's number one. But a lot of them also do not really acknowledge that they even exist. And thirdly, they would like to flatten Gaza. So if there is a unity government with centrist or responsible politicians, we will likely see a different tactic, a different answer from Israel. But if Netanyahu doesn't follow through with it and sticks with his own cabinet and the far-right ministers, it will be probably a much harsher response. That's at least what I think.
You just talked there, Yotam, about a different tactic, and we are hearing from Hamas that they will not negotiate on hostages until the fighting is over. That creates a very difficult problem for Israeli soldiers, doesn't it, as they go into Gaza and wreak what Israel says is mighty revenge. How on earth are they going to differentiate Hamas terrorists from civilians?
They cannot, for the most part, and they will also likely kill Israeli hostages. Hamas has already said that 4 Israelis have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. So if Israel continues to launch airstrikes and bombard Gaza, the likelihood of killing your own people will just rise. It's just very simple. So the question for Israel right now is whether Israel will negotiate with Hamas and free thousands of Palestinian terrorists from Israeli jails in exchange for the roughly 150 Israeli hostages kept in Gaza. That is a big price to pay, but I think a lot of people here are hoping for that, at least the relatives of those kept hostage inside Gaza. Others will likely say, just flatten Gaza, get it over with, and this is the collateral damage. So lots of divided opinions here on that issue.
Yeah, and increasing international concern about the humanitarian situation with UNICEF and indeed the UN itself saying that the siege may be illegal. We've got, I think the Rafah crossing is partially open in southern Gaza into Egypt, which would be the corridor, I guess, for humanitarian aid. What is the government likely to decide on that?
Well, first of all, we do hear Israeli media reporting that Egypt has warned Israel not to try and force Gazans out of Gaza and into the Sinai desert. In other words, resettle millions of people from Gaza into the Sinai desert. Israel kind of hinted at that earlier. They told all Gazans to get out if they can. Well, the only way they can get out really right now is the border crossing with Egypt, and that's also not likely. Egypt is not letting millions of Palestinians just into Sinai. So that's not really a likely scenario. What is more likely is that Israel will continue these bombardments and we'll see the death toll rising, at least in the coming hours, and the humanitarian disaster unfolding on both sides. Let's remember that. There is an absolute humanitarian disaster in Israel right now, with Israeli rescue organizations constantly uncovering new bodies. And on the Palestinian side, we see the death toll rising rapidly.
Yotam, a question many people might be asking is, Hamas, we know they are a terrorist organisation. We know what they've done over the last few days is utterly barbaric. But when we look at the pictures, as we are now, of what is happening in Gaza City, of how Israel is flattening Gaza City, what does that make Israel and Netanyahu in people's eyes?
First of all, this is part of Hamas's PR campaign. Not only is it good for them, for Hamas, to show the world that Gazans are suffering in larger numbers, to show these pictures to the rest of the world, so as to shift sympathy from the Israelis who were slaughtered onto Palestinian children and women who are now being killed in Gaza. It's a very clear tactic for Hamas, and they are very cowardly in the way that they hide underneath underneath the earth. They are in tunnels and they are in hiding in bunkers. The leaders are, and that's always the case. They wait until the military campaign or the war is over, and then they come back to the surface and see the destruction and the death that they have caused. And this is exactly what we're seeing now. It's the same recipe as Hamas always uses to try and gain sympathy from the world.
Now, the other significant thing is what's not happened, and that is that the border with the north, with Lebanon and the Hezbollah forces on the other side, that has been relatively quiet. What is the thinking about that, bearing in mind that Iran, of course, denying that the country's been involved in these attacks, but praising those who've carried them out?
The question really is how involved Iran is. And according to the military, the fingerprints are always on, the Iranian fingerprints are always on terrorist attacks because Iran sponsors Islamic Jihad, finances them, trains them, it meets with Hamas leaders. But Iran itself says it's not involved. And the Israeli military also said that Iran likely didn't actually give the order. Now, the northern border is even more sensitive because of Hezbollah, which is a much stronger entity than Hamas. So far, we've seen Israeli airstrikes kill 3 Hezbollah members, and in return, one Israeli soldier has been killed in a cross-border attack by Islamic Jihad. So this border is very, 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 it's a crucial area for Israel, and it's very sensitive, really.
And what of life there in Tel Aviv? We can see 1 or 2 people behind you there, but relatively quiet. I gather you've had air sirens going off at various intervals. How are people going about their daily lives there?
In Tel Aviv, obviously, life is a little bit normal, a little bit more normal than in the south, for example. Along the border, the Gaza border communities have been evacuated. Most people have left at this point, so it's a complete war zone flooded with military and ambulances and emergency services. Whereas in Tel Aviv, life is a little bit more normal, but as you see, there's barely any people. And this is it's not a holiday today. We're supposed to have normal life in Tel Aviv, and people are simply staying inside because they're afraid, really. And they're also watching the news. They want to know what is happening. When is this situation going to be under control?
OK, well, Yotam, thank you very much indeed for updating us there with the situation in Tel Aviv, with, of course, fast-developing situations both in Gaza and, as you say, the eyes on the north as well. We'll be back to you as we get more. Thank you very much indeed for your time here on GB News.
Well, the Prime Minister has been speaking with reporters just a few moments ago about Palestinian aid and protests over the issue in the UK. Here's what he had to say.
Israel and Gaza if we can. Can you detail what the UK is doing in response? Are you reviewing aid to Palestine, and are you fearful of seeing demonstrations and violence in the streets here in the UK? We know there have been pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli demonstrations on the streets here.
Well, we stand in solidarity with Israel and the people of Israel in the face of these barbaric acts of terrorism. And last night I went to visit a synagogue in London to express my support for the Jewish community in the UK. I was unequivocal with them that we will make sure that they feel safe at this time, and the police have been given very clear guidance and advice from the government to do everything that they can to keep the community safe. They will clamp down on any behaviour that falls foul of the law. I just remind everyone that Hamas is a proscribed terrorist organisation. People should not be supporting Hamas, and we will make sure that we hold people to account if they are.
What's the latest on the number of Britons injured, missing or dead, and what is the UK government doing to help get Britons out of this area should they wish to leave?
Yeah, I know there will be families who are anxious about their loved ones in the region. I want to reassure them we're doing everything we can, working very closely with the Israeli authorities to establish what is happening on the ground, provide support to people where it's needed. I'd urge anyone there to contact the Foreign Office so that they have their details, follow the advice locally from the Israelis but also from the Foreign Office, and we stand ready to support everyone the best we can.
Prime Minister.
Just a few minutes ago, and of course, just to remind you earlier, James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, saying there were a significant number, that was the phrase he used, of British-Israeli nationals caught in the conflict. We'll update you as we get more, of course, from the Foreign Office.
Do stay with us here on the live desk. We'll be going to Liverpool, where the Labour Party conference is taking place, and looking ahead to a major speech today to be made by Sir Keir Starmer at the Labour conference. Is he a Prime Minister in waiting? Stay with us.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time.
Welcome Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Live desk, let's bring you the latest pictures showing the plumes of smoke still rising there from Gaza, particularly, we believe, in the north, where it is known Hamas has a strong enclave or base. Suggestions from the Israeli Air Force, they've carried out some 200 air raids or targets being hit overnight. And as a result of that, we do have various bodies, the World Health Organization, UNICEF and the United Nations, saying that there needs to be now a concentration on a humanitarian corridor being established, or certainly humanitarian supplies being taken into the Gaza Strip.
Israel has said it wants mighty revenge. The Israeli Defense Force claiming it's fired 4,500 rockets. And they have been pounding Gaza, the fiercest airstrikes we are seeing now in the 75-year history of its conflict with the Palestinians. These airstrikes hitting Gaza despite Hamas threatening to execute an Israeli captive for every home that is hit. We understand there are some 130 hostages, Israeli hostages, being held in Gaza at the moment.
Yeah, the latest we're getting from the Hamas Political Bureau, which is based in Qatar. This is Ismail Haniyeh saying that Hamas will not negotiate with Israel over hostages until it's captured, until the fighting is over. Clearly no information yet as to whether there'll be a ground incursion from Israel, but the numbers we have to remind you, the Palestinian Health Authority saying 770 have been killed in Gaza itself, while in Israel more than 900, they're saying, with many bodies now being recovered from the kibbutz in the south of the country that was attacked by those Hamas.
Plumes of smoke we can see now over Gaza, and just looking at this footage, it gives you a very good idea of how densely populated Gaza is. It is only some 6 miles wide, some 25 miles long, and is home to over 2 million people.
More from Gaza and Israel as it comes through, but let's reflect, of course, that we've got a major speech from Labour leader Keir Starmer this afternoon in Liverpool, and he's expected to say perhaps the political tide turning towards Labour. Will he be setting out perhaps plans to have at least 2 terms in power? Let's get the latest with Christopher Hope, our political editor, who is there. Christopher, we had certainly the message of rebuilding Britain from the Shadow Chancellor yesterday. I think the theme to be continued by Sir Keir today.
That's right. He's going to talk about having a decade of national renewal by a new Labour government if it wins power in the election expected next year. The party will never again return to the party of protest. That's obviously a clear nod to the period of Jeremy Corbyn. For me, that almost summarises this whole event the past 3 days. The cardigans have gone. Mark and Pippa, the suits are back. This party is ready for power. And that's the impression which Sir Keir Starmer will try and give members. And I'll tell you that if they're starting at 2 o'clock over in the hall, it's all ticket only. All the tickets have gone. There'll be a big crowd of people around the GBNews stand. We had 100 watching Rachel Reeves yesterday. There's a feeling here that momentum, so important in politics, is definitely with this Labour Party right now.
And Peter Mandelson speaking to us on the GBNews stand, drawing those parallels with 1997.
That's right, he was just behind us here, wasn't he? And I saw him approaching, so I was able to tell Andrew Pearce for GBNews viewers to turn round, because the guy who many think is the hand behind the kind of Starmer project is approaching like some kind of shark through the waters. And we got to ask him, and he knew, of course, all of Keir Starmer's 5 objectives, which not many of us know that, because, of course, we're focusing much more on the Tory objectives. But there's a feeling here that, in many ways, Starmer's the coming man. I did ask him in that interview, do you think he lacks the kind of Blair magic dust? And Mandelson said, well, he's the best leader we've had since Blair, since 2007. And he's doing it his own way. He's not being the same as Blair. Blair was an amazing orator, we all remember that. I was there for all of his party conference speeches, utterly mesmerising. And the Tories couldn't wait till he basically walked away from power. And that's what they think that Keir Starmer hasn't got that, but I'm not sure he needs that. I mean, they are projecting a fresh, new team. And all the whole debate, I mean, this Israel, dreadful scenes from Israel. Under Jeremy Corbyn, that would have been a real test for the leadership, I think, for this party. It hasn't even been a problem in terms of any issue of discipline or any rows on the floor. We had David Lammy being very clear about the party standing behind Israel from the platform yesterday, and that has really set the whole tone of a grown-up party ready for power.
And as far as Sir Keir's speech goes, he will probably speak for what, maybe an hour. It should give people a little more of an insight into who the man is, because many people just aren't really that sure.
That's right, Pip, you're so right, aren't you? He lacks that visibility. He's quite buttoned up, that's in his nature. When you meet him privately, he's all smiles and making jokes about the football, but he is buttoned up on the stage, and he lacks that, almost the actor in Blair made him so relaxed on stage, didn't he? And he lacks that kind of easy way he is. But I think, yeah, we're going to see not a lot of news in what he says. It's more introducing himself as the next Prime Minister. This idea that he might rule for, as I say, this decade of power. Now, there's an issue of hubris there, don't forget, because remember when Boris Johnson allowed those headlines in September 2021 to say he'd rule for 3 terms of a Johnson government? Well, he was out within 9 months. So politics comes at you quite fast nowadays. Keep watching GB News.
And just looking at the messages we're likely to get, bearing in mind, as we said, what Rachel Reeves was saying about rebuilding Britain yesterday, we think there may be some announcements of a new generation of large towns, suburbs, Georgian-style homes. I mean, this could be quite controversial. It could be a vote loser, couldn't it? Bearing in mind all the concerns about the home counties blue belt, about green belt land, pylons, new towns and so on.
Well, that's right, Mark. You know, I might remember the eco-towns. They're a big deal in the late noughties under Gordon Brown. Lots of people in communities got really upset about that. But the idea of putting these standalone new towns with Georgian architecture, that's the kind of making it look nice, in green fields is this idea, but how on earth do you buy them? We all know that the cost of land goes up very quickly as soon as any development happens nearby. So that's an idea, but getting Britain building again is the idea. 1.5 million new homes they want to build in the 5 years of a Labour government, a third more than the Tories are planning on building at the moment. But to do that, they're going to take some bold choices, and there will be conflict along the way.
And something we're hearing Labour talk about, which we haven't heard a lot about so far, is grey belt land. Not green belt land, grey belt land.
That's a nod to the fact that lots of green belt isn't actually greenfield sites. It's car parks, it's the previously developed land, which is in the green belt. So you and I might think about Pippa as brownfield sites, pretty sites that why can't we put a building on there? But in fact, it sits within the curtilage of Greenbelt. Greenbelt was, of course, a legal definition to try and stop the sprawl of towns building outwards into green fields after the war, and that's now seen as sacrosanct. Certainly in the home counties, Tory governments have always said that is important, but the idea of this grey belt is where they might try and build. That's the easiest choices. The harder ones are the big green field developments, which many would say we are starting to require.
And of course, we had the indication how important the economy will be from Rachel Reeves yesterday. Securonomics was the phrase that she introduced to us.
Yes.
But then we've got the IMF today saying, well, forecast for next year down from 0.6 from 1%, halving the estimate on growth. If they do get into power, they've got a lot in the in tray.
Yeah, that's right. It's not like in '97 when, of course, Ken Clarke's careful stewardship of the economy arguably left a massive bounty for the Labour government coming in. Completely different, big choices to be made, and that's why you're not seeing the Labour team here committing to HS2 if they get into power. They're going to say, wait and see what's under the bonnet when they get in. But I think that Rachel Reeves was massively helped by that intervention, very rare intervention on the political stage, from former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, appointed by, of course, George Osborne, by a Tory government, saying it's about time we heard her ideas put into action. And that will reassure, I think, lots of business people. I think that there's been events here in the conference, business event yesterday, when the last week Mr Sunak said that we love you, but Labour will tolerate you. Well, I've been told by somebody who was there that's not the case. This party loves business because they know that's where the money's going to come from to invest.
Christopher Hope, political editor, thank you. We will, of course, bring you Sir Keir Starmer's speech this afternoon, live here on GB News. Right, let's get your latest headlines.
Yep.
Here's Aaron.
Aaron's waiting.
Hi there, it's 12:31. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Apartment blocks, schools and United Nations buildings in Gaza have been hit by Israeli airstrikes, the most brutal in the conflict's 75-year history. Israel struck hundreds of targets overnight, forcing nearly 200,000 people to flee as fighting enters a fourth day. The UN is warning Israel's siege of Gaza is illegal under international law, but has also said the abduction of hostages by Hamas is forbidden. The enclave is home to 2.3 million people, and the UN is warning of a mounting humanitarian disaster. Supplies of water, food and electricity to Gaza have been cut off. Its health ministry says at least 770 Palestinians have been killed and 4,000 injured since Saturday. And these pictures are coming to us live from Gaza. It's just after 2:30 in the afternoon there. Now, this area was bombarded earlier with some Israeli strikes hitting the nearby Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. Israel says it has now retaken control of the Gaza border fence, which was stormed by Hamas gunmen, and 900 Israelis have been killed since Saturday. Former Labour Minister Lord Mandelson says Sir Keir Starmer is no Tony Blair, but he is in touch with people. In a spontaneous discussion at the party conference in Liverpool, he told GB News what he thinks of the Labour leader.
Keir Starmer is not Tony Blair, but I said something else. He's the nearest thing to Tony Blair of any leader of the Labour Party since Blair.
Right.
He's a mainstream politician, you know. He's completely in touch with and connected with what people are thinking in the country. He's totally committed to restarting the economy, and he's not wobbly on defence and national security.
And the government says it's now safe for asylum seekers to return to the Bibi Stockholm barge, but they haven't set a date for that yet. The barge has been vacant since an outbreak of Legionella in August, but local mayor Carolyn Parks is set to challenge the Home Office in court. She believes the government needs planning permission to use the barge in Portland Port. More on all of our stories is available on our website, that is gbnews.com.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
And welcome back to the live desk. Now, the Home Office has announced it's begun to notify asylum seekers that they will be sent back to the Bibby Stockholm barge in Portland Harbour from the October the 19th. But the Mayor of Portland, Carolyn Parks, continuing an application for judicial review into the government's decision to house them on that barge.
Acting in her capacity as a private citizen and local resident, she's arguing that the use of the barge breaches the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990 and should not go ahead. Well, for the latest updates, we can speak to GB News' national reporter Theo Chikomba, who is outside the Royal Courts of Justice. So tell us a bit more, Theo, about what her lawyers have been saying.
Yes, well, a very good afternoon to you. As you've just rightly pointed out, that she is here in her own capacity. Carolyn Parks is arguing that this planning permission should have gone ahead before the barge went into the port over in Portland, and she's essentially looking to get the green light today from the judge to see whether she can take on the Home Office. Now, in terms of what we saw in July, we saw the barge arriving in Dorset at Portland, and then, of course, on the 7th of August, we saw some of those asylum seekers going onto the barge. And only after 4 days, they had to be taken off because of Legionella, which was found in the water system. But today, though, we've now understood from the Home Office that asylum seekers will be returning onto the barge. However, they haven't said the specific date of when they will be returning onto there. In a statement, they said that all necessary tests had been conducted on the Bibby Stockholm and that letters had been sent out to asylum seekers, reiterating that accommodation continues to be offered on a no-choice basis. And as I say, no date has been confirmed. But in terms of the legal representatives of Carolyn Parks today, they've been looking at 4 grounds to see whether they can go ahead with this application. And some of those are whether it is right to separate people by race, or if this is indirect discrimination taking place. They also touched on if this was on land or on sea, it can still be considered as a development should something need to be done in the future. This should have gone through a planning process, which they argue the Home Office didn't do.
So that's a key question, isn't it? Is it under the aegis of the local authority and planning regulations, or is it effectively, I guess, offshore?
Well, this is it, and the judge rightly pointed out that, of course, the barge is on water, and water's always going to be there. It's not a case of having land where it might have some water sometime and then there isn't. So the judge has been repeatedly asking questions whether or not this is a case which would apply on land, for example. So those are some of the arguments they've been going backwards and forwards, particularly on the first and second ground. The judge has some concerns and saying, is this going to help you if I do give permission for this to go ahead, and whether there is jurisdiction for them when it comes to the law for this to go ahead as well.
OK, Theo, outside the courts, thank you for that. Of course, more details as they come through.
Let's return to the conflict between Israel and Hamas, because it has translated into protests right across the world, including here in the UK. One of those areas was near the Israeli embassy in London, and you can see footage there from last night, those protests taking place in Kensington High Street, I think it was. Let's cross to Ray Addison, our GB News reporter. Ray, what more can you tell us about those protests? We were just looking at some footage there from last night.
Well, police guarding this private road in West London, which leads to the Israeli embassy, have actually left now, but you will be able to see in a moment that they've actually padlocked with heavy-duty chains, the gates that lead to that building. Now, hundreds of people, of course, as you were saying, took part in a pro-Palestine demonstration yesterday evening, and that prompted windows to be boarded up and a very heavy police presence as well. Groups there included Stop the War and the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. People at that event were waving placards calling for Israel to, quote, end the occupation. They were also letting off fireworks, lighting flares and chanting Free Palestine as well. Now, Ben, our cameraman's just going to pan around so you can see the situation as it stands today. You'll still be able to see now that there are a lot of signs of that protest still remaining. Windows are boarded up, and the police have actually placed these heavy barricades to limit access to this private road. In fact, there was just a truck coming down here earlier delivering a generator to one of the properties that wasn't able to access it because they've restricted access to that extent. Now, there's quite a lot of stickers, Free Palestine stickers, been left all over the roads, and you won't be able to see it, but just directly behind our camera, there's quite a lot of graffiti that's been sprayed onto the buildings as well, again saying Free Palestine. Police officers telling us that their concern is that there may be an even bigger protest this Saturday, when obviously more people are off. Now, we do know that there were three arrests last night across London, two of which were close to this location. Now, just to give you an idea of the age range, one was a boy as young as 15, and the eldest was a man of 70 years of age. Some of the charges across the three that were arrested include racially motivated criminal damage and possession of an offensive weapon. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has urged the police to increase their policing of areas with a large Jewish community to provide some kind of feeling of safety for them. She's stressing we have absolute zero tolerance. This is the Met Police now stressing we have absolutely zero tolerance for hate crimes. They say that officers will continue to have an enhanced visible presence on the streets of London. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has been doing the rounds as well today. He described the current situation as difficult and delicate. He's urging supporters of Palestine to stay at home. He says there is no need for people to come out. It causes distress to the Jewish community.
Yeah, and to indicate why it's so important how the diplomatic channels are open, of course, with the Israeli embassy. James Cleverly having said this morning that I think the phrase was a significant number of British and Israeli nationals are caught in the conflict.
Absolutely, and he's spoken to Palestine's ambassador to the UK, Hussam Zomlot, and he's told him that it's important now for Palestinian voices, people in leadership, to come out and criticise the appalling behaviour of the terrorist organisation Hamas, to criticise their atrocious actions, the indiscriminate killings and the murders, and to do that very vocally now.
Ray, outside the embassy for the moment, thank you very much for updating us.
The UK is on forecast to be the slowest growing economy amongst the G7 next year. Now, that's according to projections from the International Monetary Fund.
Yeah, the figures are pretty stark. It's slashed Britain's growth outlook from 1% to just 0.6% ahead of, what could be the general election year. So let's get more with our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, in Liverpool at the Labour Party conference, who will be looking fairly closely at these figures, Liam, in terms of the job in hand if they do get into power.
I'd say, Mark and Pip, that the leader of the opposition's speechwriting team, they're probably updating his speech as we speak, because these figures do not present the UK economy in a flattering light at all. Tories will push back that the IMF has been very gloomy about the British economy in recent years. Many of their forecasts have turned out to be far too pessimistic. And if the IMF was correct in its previous forecasts, then the UK would currently be in recession with the economy contracting, which of course is not currently the case. Let's just have a look at some of these numbers. I've put them into a graphic for you, so hopefully you can see them. And we know that the UK economy, says the IMF, will grow by 0.4% this year. I think that's probably about right. But then they say growth will be 0.6% in 2024, and that would mean that the UK is the lowest growing economy in the G7. Interestingly, though, this IMF forecast, it doesn't include the big upgrade to UK economic growth numbers, which the ONS, our own Office for National Statistics, announced during the summer. Do you remember during the summer these numbers came out? Suddenly the UK's actually recovered quite quickly from the global COVID pandemic. The numbers were much better than we thought. And also the IMF does include in its assumptions their forecast that the Bank of England will raise interest rates all the way up to 6% from the current rate of 5.25%. Most economists would say, Mark and Pip, that 6% peak of UK interest rates is far too pessimistic. The peak is likely to be either 5.25% where we currently are, or 5.5%, which means the economy won't get hammered as much as it otherwise would. So all in all, these numbers are very pessimistic from the IMF, but there are very good reasons to believe that they're going to turn out to be too gloomy when the growth numbers for 23 and 2024 are actually published.
Yeah, however, just on that issue of interest rates, it is significant, of course, that they're indicating they believe that interest rates will be higher for longer, even though they won't perhaps peak at that sort of level. And this is something you've spoken about in terms of what the Bank of England did in terms of monetary policy.
Yeah, look, I used to work at the International Monetary Fund. I know how these people think. And there's some sense in what they're saying. I think their headline growth forecasts for the UK have been far too pessimistic for far too long. 27 of the IMF's last 30 forecasts about the UK have turned out to be too pessimistic. And I do think there's some politics going on here. The IMF, basically run by the US, they don't like Brexit. There are lots of people working at the IMF who are former civil servants who don't like Brexit, by the way. But having said that, the IMF are right to point out that interest rates could go higher for longer. Their 6% forecast of an interest rate peak in the UK is the aspect of these numbers come out today with which I have the least problem. I don't think it will happen, but I do think it's possible. And the reason is because of what you and I and Pip have been discussing a lot on GB News during the day in recent weeks, and that's the oil price. Oil prices are going high. The OPEC exporters cartel is deliberately restricting the amount of oil they're putting on global markets, deliberately pushing up the oil price. They were doing that anyway. Now we've seen this ghastly explosion of violence, tragic violence in Israel, of course, given the conflict with Hamas. Oil prices are ticking up some more. High oil prices means higher inflation, means it's harder for the Bank of England to lower interest rates, and it means we may even see some more interest rate rises. So there's some truth in what the IMF is saying, but I think overall it's too pessimistic.
Liam, just very quickly, you mentioned the Bank of England there. What was your take on the former Bank of England, Mark Carney, reacting to Rachel Reeves's speech yesterday at the Labour conference? Should he not be apolitical?
Well, I have to be a little bit careful, Pip, here, because putting my cards on the table, I was actually at university with Mark Carney. I've known the guy for a long time. Having said that, I don't think it's right. I just don't think it's right that somebody who was paid to be, very well paid, to be an independent governor of the Bank of England, you know, one of our most senior civil servants in the UK, recruited from his native Canada in order to be the governor of the Bank of England, recruited by former Tory Chancellor George Osborne. I think he undermines the role of an independent Bank of England governor when he clearly enters into party politics. He undermines his own reputation as a Bank of England governor. He undermines the reputation of all previous and future Bank of England governors. It's absolutely vital that the governor of the Bank of England is seen to be above party politics. And in my view, Mark Carney has clearly entered the realm of party politics, sending an endorsement to Rachel Reeves at such a crucial political moment. Mark, I wouldn't have done that.
Just looking at a bit of controversy too in what we're expecting from Sir Keir Starmer this afternoon, and it's being trailed that he'll talk about these new generation of large towns and suburbs, Georgian-style townhouses, compulsory purchase powers. That's going to send some alarm bells around the home counties, isn't it?
It will and it won't, Mark. I mean, look, we haven't built a new town, a major dwelling in this country in my lifetime. And I'm, you know, the wrong side of 50. During my lifetime, the population of the UK has increased by about 20 million people. This is a completely unsustainable thing. So I welcome any attempts to build new towns. I've written about that a lot in the past. But I think what Labour are trying to do by emphasising compulsory purchase orders, being very, very ideological, they're talking about taking what's called planning gain off landowners. So when landowners sell agricultural land and it gets planning permission for residential property, the value of that land rockets 200 or 300-fold. At the moment, all that upside, what we call planning uplift, goes to landowners and their land agents. Labour want to take all that upside and give it to local authorities in a complete sort of ideological switch. That will lead to massive lawsuits. It will lead to endless blockages in the Supreme Court. It could even lead to the European Convention on Human Rights being invoked if we're still a member of that. I would go for a more moderate split of the planning gain. I would share it 50-50 between landowners and local authorities. The local authorities can then build the infrastructure that you need to build a new town. The developers won't build the roads and the hospitals and the schools. They'll just build the houses. So you need to be more moderate in this, I would say. But certainly very interesting that the Keir Starmer's using this key moment in his political journey to number 10 or not to stress this very controversial issue.
Yeah, Liam, thank you for updating us there. And, of course, more from Liverpool with that speech due about 2 o'clock this afternoon.
The latest from Israel, because Israeli forces are massing near the Gaza border as they pledge a mighty revenge for the deadly attack by Hamas. Whole regions have been flattened in Gaza as the region continues to be sealed off from food, fuel and medical supplies.
Yeah, the latest we're getting is that Hamas says it won't negotiate on the hostages it's taken until the end of the battle, as they declared it. Indications from the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, between 100 and 150 people being held captive in Gaza. Well, let's get the very latest now in Tel Aviv with our own reporter there, Charlie Peters. And Charlie, an indication on the political front that there may be some new kind of unity or coalition government there to try to cope with all these difficulties.
That's right. I mean, this government has attracted significant controversy since it entered into power in the Knesset last year, and its leadership is under significant scrutiny since the perceived intelligence failure that led to the attacks on Saturday morning. But now we're hearing that a cross-party and unity approach to governance is occurring. And as we're just hearing, the response from Hamas that they will not be negotiating to dealing with those people they have captured is a significant step. It comes soon after they also said, the militants, that they would execute a new hostage every time the Israeli Defense Forces launched an attack in Gaza. Well, now here in Tel Aviv, those who avoided being killed or captured by the Hamas militants have fled to this city, a place of relative safety. It's endured just one successful rocket attack since this war started, very near to the airport where we travelled through earlier today. The airport is quiet. Coming in was smooth, but many people are leaving, and we have seen reports of foreign governments and their militaries gathering potential military aircraft in the airport should a national emergency order and a need to evacuate occur.
Charlie Peters live for us in Tel Aviv. Thank you for that. We will return to you. We will also be returning to Liverpool as the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer makes his pitch to be Prime Minister. What do you think? Do stay with us.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock and you're watching the live desk here on GB News. Coming up this Tuesday lunchtime.
UNICEF calls for a humanitarian corridor as the death toll in Gaza continues to rise. The Palestinian Health Authority says 770 people have died along the Strip, while in Israel, officials say at least 900 people have been killed.
In the other headlines, a decade of national renewal. Sir Keir Starmer to address the Labour Party conference this afternoon. He sets his sights on Downing Street, expecting to promise a new generation of towns and suburbs. But does everyone want them? We're live in Liverpool.
And the Home Office announces they will return asylum seekers to the Bibby Stockholm barge in Portland in Dorset as early as next week, following the lengthy Legionnaire's disease delay.
And as Scotland tries to recover from the widespread flooding, another 33 warnings and 10 flood alerts now being put in place across much of the country. We're live in Perth, one of the worst hit areas. Before that, though, latest headlines now with Aaron.
Good afternoon, it's 1:01. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Apartment blocks, schools and United Nations buildings in Gaza have been hit by Israeli airstrikes, the most brutal in the conflict's 75-year history. Israel struck hundreds of targets overnight, forcing nearly 200,000 people to flee. Fighting has entered a fourth day. The UN is warning Israel's siege of Gaza is illegal under international law, but also says the abduction of hostages by Hamas is forbidden. The enclave is home to 2.3 million people And the UN's warning of a mounting humanitarian disaster. Supplies of water, food and electricity to Gaza have been cut off. Its health ministry says at least 770 Palestinians have been killed and 4,000 injured since Saturday. Live pictures now from Gaza, where the Israeli Air Force continue to carry out waves of intensive airstrikes on Hamas targets. Israel's Defence Force has confirmed it's retaken control of the border fence that was stormed by Hamas at the weekend, which left at least 900 people dead. Additionally, it says the bodies of 1,500 Hamas militants have been found on Israeli territory. Meanwhile, Israeli soldiers have been clearing the Kfar Aza kibbutz, one of the hardest hit areas, on Saturday. Troops have been retrieving the bodies of civilians killed when Hamas breached the border from Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition has approved the formation of a unity government to include opposition politicians in a bid to shore up support. He's described Hamas as savage, as akin to the ISIS terror group.
We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it. Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come.
The leaders of France, Germany, Italy, the US and the UK have issued a joint statement offering their united support for Israel and condemnation of Hamas for what they've described as appalling acts of terrorism. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the UK will support British-Israeli families.
We stand in solidarity with Israel and the people of Israel in the face of these barbaric acts of terrorism. And last night I went to visit a synagogue in London to express my support for the Jewish community in the UK. I was unequivocal with them that we will make sure that they feel safe at this time, and the police have been given very clear guidance and advice from the government to do everything that they can to keep the community safe. They will clamp down on any behaviour that falls foul of the law. I just remind everyone that Hamas is a proscribed terrorist organisation.
Let's turn to the Labour Party conference, where former Cabinet Minister Lord Mandelson says Sir Keir Starmer's no Tony Blair, but he is in touch with people. In a spontaneous discussion in Liverpool, he told GB News what he thinks of the Labour leader.
Keir Starmer is not Tony Blair, but I said something else. He's the nearest thing to Tony Blair of any leader of the Labour Party since Blair. Right. He's a mainstream politician, you know. He's completely in touch with and connected with what people are thinking in the country. He's totally committed to restarting the economy, and he's not wobbly on defence and national security.
The government says it's now safe for asylum seekers to return to the Bibi Stockholm barge. No date has been set, though. It's been vacant since an outbreak of Legionella disease in August. Local Mayor Carolyn Parks, though, is set to challenge the Home Office in court. She believes the government needs planning permission to use the barge in Portland Port. The government will spend nearly £200 million to attract more teachers into the profession. The money will be used to fund scholarships, bursaries and salary grants. Scholarships for those training to teach maths, physics, chemistry and computing will be brought up to £30,000 tax-free. It comes after teaching unions warned of a deepening recruitment and retention crisis. And the UK and Ireland have been confirmed as hosts for Euro 2028. The joint bid was the only one remaining after Turkey withdrew. Turkey will focus on a joint bid with Italy for Euro 2032. 6 of the venues are in England, with 1 each from Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, Scotland and Wales. Now, 2 spots have been reserved should any of the hosts not qualify. England, though, have requested they want to go through qualifying for the tournament. This is GB News across the UK on TV, on digital radio, and if you want us on your smart speaker, just say play GB News. Now back to Mark and Pip.
Thank you very much, Aaron, and welcome back to the live desk. Now, the latest we have is that Hamas say they will not negotiate while the airstrikes continue on Gaza. Indeed, the Israeli Air Force saying they've carried out another 200 overnight. And earlier, Hamas saying that they'd threatened to kill one captive for every Palestinian home bombed without warning.
These are the latest pictures from Gaza, where you can see many parts of this very densely populated area, one of the most densely populated areas on Earth, home to some 2 million people. Many parts have been absolutely flattened. Well, among the families believed to be held captive is this mother, this Israeli mother, and her 2 young sons. Latest reports in Israel say the death toll from the Hamas attacks has reached 900 people, whilst Israeli retaliation has claimed the lives of almost 700 Palestinians.
Let's get the latest now in Tel Aviv, and our reporter Charlie Peters is there. And Charlie, with this political change that you outlined, of course, we've got this new coalition or unity government. They've got to make the decision as to how they treat this issue of the hostages being held in Gaza and whether indeed they go for any kind of ground incursion into the Strip.
Well, that's right. And this conflict, this war, is definitely now entering a new phase. In the last 24 hours, the Israeli Defense Forces have said that they've now secured that border with Gaza after it was overrun so drastically and dramatically on Saturday. Special forces pushed down and have cleared out the remaining pockets of Hamas terrorists in the area. This is a significant upgrade because as late as yesterday, we knew that there were some 7 locations where they were still fighting. They have now mined the fences that were broken through, and they have cleared through the small farming communities that Hamas committed some violent atrocities in. And earlier today, I spoke to one of the members of a family who had survived a horrifying ordeal there, and some members of the family have also sadly been captured. His name is Ahal Basari, and the details of that attack on the kibbutz in Be'eri is in this report here, which does contain some images that our viewers may find distressing.
Executing innocents in their homes. This is the moment Hamas terrorists stormed a small community in Israel. They pushed through the gates on motorbikes with rifles on their backs. Footage acquired by the South First responders showed terrorists looting dead bodies. They have since been ejected by Israeli forces. RPGs and rifles are littered among children's toys and garden furniture as Israeli forces survey the devastation. Over 100 bodies have already been recovered, according to local humanitarian agencies, after militants rampaged through the unprotected village. That's roughly 10% of the tiny farming community's population. This location was among the worst affected areas when Hamas stormed Israel on Saturday, with the Israelis now claiming to have re-established control of all of its communities surrounding Gaza. Israeli forces are now expected to focus their attention on Gaza, where Hamas militants are holding dozens of hostages and firing more rocket attacks into Israel.
Picking up, did you say?
Well, later today, I will be meeting with the family members of some hostages held in Gaza, American citizens, really exposing the international dimension of this conflict, as dozens of the confirmed casualties on the Israeli side are revealed to be international.
Charlie, thank you for that. Just to remind you, the latest figures we're getting from the Palestinian Health Authority, 770 killed in Gaza, and in terms of the Israeli authorities, more than 900. We'll update you, of course, as we get more details coming through.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is expected to say that the political tide is turning towards his party as he sets his sights on at least 2 terms in power during a speech which is due to start within the hour.
Well, we think there'll be a promise of a decade of national renewal, suggesting perhaps he's confident that he can stay in government until the mid-2030s, a 2-term government. Well, let's get the latest now in Liverpool, and Gloria has got more for us there.
Yes, I'm with somebody who knows Keir Starmer incredibly well. She was the MP for 10 years in Darlington. She lost her seat in 2019 and went on to run Keir Starmer's leadership campaign. What does he need to do today, Jenny Chapman?
Oh, I think today he needs to speak to the country, and he needs to reassure and just show that he's got the ideas and the vision and the stability that the country is really crying out for. And I think we've had enough of drama and chopping and changing and policy announcements that go nowhere. The country wants to know, who are you? What do you stand for? What are you going to do for me? And, are you really going to do what you say you're going to do? And Keir Starmer is that kind of politician. He's very grounded. And if he makes a statement today, he's going to deliver.
But lots of voters still say, we don't know what the Labour Party stand for. We don't know what he really stands for. Why haven't you been able to get that message through?
I think we are starting to now. And what you've seen over the last few months and what you've seen this week is sort of colouring in the gaps, really, I think is what people are seeing this as. So, the announcements that we're making on housing, on the health service, and about, investing in these new scanners to get people diagnosed. We've got 100,000 people waiting over 3 months for diagnostics that are about whether or not they've got cancer. And, that's just, you can't leave people like that. So we are starting to get some of that more detail in. We know that's what people want. And by the time the election comes, we won't be asking people to vote Labour without knowing what we're going to do. But no one's going to do that. So, we understand that people want more information, and that's what they're going to get. And that's part of what this week's about.
Last week at the Conservative Party conference, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, was introduced by his wife.
Yes.
Might we see that today?
Oh, well, I mean, I am Vic Starmer's biggest fan. She is amazing, and I would absolutely love to see Vic introduce Keir on stage, but the girl's too cool, she'll be there, she'll be really supportive, and I'm not expecting to see Vic Starmer introduce her husband, but, she is, make no mistake, she would do a great job if she did it.
And just finally on the policy detail of today, and the sort of messaging of the conference to get Britain building again. Now, you and I were both MPs.
Yes.
Planning sounds great when you do it in a speech, but actually when it comes down, you say, no, you're getting a new housing estate, then
not everyone's thrilled, are they?
Not everyone is thrilled. No. How are you going to make it reality without upsetting voters if you do come to power?
The reality is, what happens at the moment is that, and one of the reasons not everyone is thrilled, is because developers just say, right, we're going to do a few hundred houses here, a few hundred houses there. No one's looking at infrastructure, or not enough. No one's looking at school places, pressure on GP services. What we want to do is take away that kind of almost random, speculative, piecemeal development and do it in a much more planned way. So we're building communities because we do need more houses. A lot of us have got kids who are getting to an age where we'd like to see them get on the property ladder because we know that's how you get on in life, and you put down roots and it gives you that security and stability that we all want for our kids. And you have to have a housing building programme in order to be able to do that, but it's got to be properly managed and planned. And at the moment, with the Tories, as with so many things, it's all a bit chaotic. We're going to bring some order to it, and that means we'll be able to deliver what it is the country needs.
We're going to leave you to go into the hall and watch that speech. But Jenny Chapman, great to have you on the show. Back to you, Mark and Pip.
So just to update you here on the live desk, we're getting some news from Reuters news agency that the Hamas armed wing, a spokesman for them, has warned the residents of Ashkelon, which is in the south of Israel, near to the border with Gaza, that they have until 5 p.m. to leave. Apparently, there's been a telegram that's been sent. No indication as to what Hamas is threatening, but of course, this is near the kibbutz that was attacked with those paragliders and others coming over the border fence with more than 260 people being killed as a result of that. These details are just coming through. No riposte from the Israeli authorities at the moment, but clearly this is rather alarming for those troops still in that area trying to hunt down any remaining Hamas gunmen.
This is also a live shot we can show you from Gaza, which, is being reduced to rubble. Some 2 million plus people live there. The World Health Organization is warning that medical supplies in Gaza have been used up. The UN is warning that there is a severe shortage of drinking water, and UNICEF is appealing for a humanitarian corridor to be set up in and out of Gaza. The Israeli military is carrying out its threat to wreak mighty revenge.
Yeah, I think many of these pictures we're getting from the Khan Yunis area, which is where it's believed that Hamas had a lot of its administrative buildings and political control centres, but also we're getting from authorities in Gaza that the airstrikes have been going further south, down towards the crossing with Egypt, which, of course, is the area where the United Nations and other aid agencies said wants to be reopened to get a humanitarian corridor, but indications that at the moment there are just very few crossings being allowed, pre-planned crossings at that Rafah crossing, so effectively Gaza's still cut off at the moment.
The UN Human Rights Chief is saying that these retaliatory airstrikes against Hamas, these sieges, he is saying that they are illegal under international law. But Israeli military, they've called up some 300,000 reservists to impose this total blockade of the Gaza Strip.
Well, let's get more now from Tel Aviv, and we can speak once more to Israeli-based journalist Natalie Blenford, who spoke to us yesterday. Natalie, thanks for updating us. I mean, lots of developments in terms of Gaza there, and maybe Ashkelon as well, and political developments too, with this suggestion of this coalition or unity government.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, the news changes by the second here at the moment. The Ashkelon warning is obviously very alarming. Look, I mean, it's such an enormous situation that they need to figure out. Obviously, the reason that we are in the situation, the reason that Gaza is being bombed is because Hamas started a war on Saturday morning, and they have hostages, which they have also, this is also a disregard for international law. And if they return the hostages, I imagine the response from Israel would be different, but they're threatening instead to execute a hostage every time there's an airstrike. But it's kind of like, I mean, I'm not a military analyst, but I can just tell you it's obviously something that has escalated out of nowhere. We're only Tuesday, it started on Saturday, and it feels like it's been going on for about 5 or 6 weeks already. I think Hamas is trying to incite panic. It's also trying to incite more terror. They also issued a statement earlier saying that they want Friday to be a day of mass rallies around the world. I mean, I don't really want to give them airtime to what they're saying, but they're essentially inciting more violence and saying that people should target as close to Jerusalem as they can. And that, obviously, if you use your brain, that can kind of suggest that Jewish people across the world are also in danger. So, it's like they are starting this war. Israel, I have no idea what Israel's strategy is because they won't reveal it. But yes, with the new unity government, hopefully we will have some more clarity later on what their plans are. And, there's been problems in Israel with the rise of some far-right politicians joining the government, and hopefully the unity government, which will be a little bit more centrist, although they're only going to focus on the war, hopefully it will be slightly more representative of Israeli rational beliefs and more focused on solving this problem and non-extremist in its nature, which would obviously be a good thing.
But you've touched on something very interesting there, and that is in terms of the way that this was actually prearranged. It took the Israeli authorities by surprise, and the question as to whether they prepared for the aftermath in trying to draw Netanyahu into what some may say is an overreaction and all the consequences thereof.
What do you mean an overreaction? You mean an overreaction from Netanyahu, or an overreaction?
In terms of what the damage would be if, for instance, a ground incursion was to take place into Gaza at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Israeli military prepare scenarios over the years, and soldiers are trained in what things would look like if there, for example, was a ground operation in Gaza or anywhere else. They have training on this. But yes, Israel was not expecting this, that's fair to say. I don't think anybody involved in this a week ago thought they would be doing a ground operation in Gaza. But, those pictures you showed earlier of the kibbutz Be'eri being, the gates being breached by these terrorists, I watched it also earlier on Twitter. It literally just exemplifies what we're dealing with, which is a peaceful community, a rural community where people were asleep, and these people waiting to start a war. And this must have been part of the master
Natalie,
plan.
I'm just going to interrupt you. We're just getting live pictures from Gaza, and it appears there are more rockets being fired from Gaza, and clearly the Iron Dome defence system has knocked a lot of them out. But it's interesting that clearly Hamas appears still to have the capability of launching attacks from within Gaza.
Well, this is what's really, really confusing because, you know, of course, Israel is bombing, and we would have hoped that that was taking out the rocket launchers, and then that would kind of expedite the end of this problem. But Hamas have their equipment all over Gaza, and they famously use their citizens' homes as human shields. They do that. It's their strategy. It's well known, and so. Yes, it's baffling that they can still, after a night of bombardment, that they can still send rockets, and it's concerning, of course. At the moment in Tel Aviv, it's relatively quiet, but that can change, you know, on a dime.
It's being reported, Natalie, that Israelis in towns close to the borders, but also Jewish Arab cities inside Israel and West Bank settlements, they are going to be armed with assault rifles. Some 4,000 have already been bought for them.
Yeah, I think that sounds, oh, there's a siren. I'm going to take you into the shelter with me. We'll go together if you want to keep me on air, but I have to go and set up my bomb shelter.
As long as you're safe to keep talking.
Yeah, just give me a second.
Well, we're just following Natalie here into her shelter. There might be a break-up on the signal, but clearly she's not going to take any chances with her own safety. It is now a reality of life for many in Israel that the sirens are still going. We saw the rockets being fired, of course, in Gaza as well. Indications that the war, as has been declared between Israel and Hamas, is continuing. Natalie, can you hear us now? Can you actually pick up the signal at the moment?
Yeah.
OK, you're safe there in your shelter.
We've just changed over Wi-Fi network, so the connection will take a second, but I am now in my shelter.
Natalie, how often does this happen, or has this been happening?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm still here. I'm safe. We can continue if you want to.
As long as you're OK, Natalie. Are you able to tell us how often you have to escape into your shelter?
It hasn't happened for about 24 hours, but I'm very fortunate that I have a shelter in my home. And if you listen now, I'm not sure if you can hear the siren still blaring. Now you're going to hear an explosion. Let's listen.
And you think that might be what, the Iron Dome defence system actually intercepting those missiles coming in?
Yeah, so basically what happens is rockets get launched. The Israelis have a very sophisticated system called the Iron Dome, which, for those that don't know about, it's not an actual dome. Easy to think it is. I used to think so. It doesn't catch the rockets like a net. It's not an actual dome, but what it does is it uses intelligence and GPS tracking to be able to intercept. So if they're sending a rocket here, Israel will send an anti, a sort of interception here, and they meet in the middle. But then you have the risk of falling debris. So this is also why you have to take shelter. The other problem is if there's bombardment, and this is what happened on Saturday. They send a lot of rockets at the same time. The Iron Dome isn't always reliable, so you have to be in a secure, protected space. I'm fortunate enough that in this modern apartment that I pay a lot of money for every month, it has a bedroom that doubles. It's a bomb shelter disguised as a bedroom. You can see my dressing gown behind you. Yeah, I'm just laughing because when things get stressful, my response is to find the humour in it. But obviously, it's quite a terrifying thing.
When you hear this and you have to get into your shelter quickly, what fear? You know, you must be being stabbed right through with fear.
It's like a physical. First of all, there's the practical. Okay, you have to seek shelter. So now I'm here in this room. I didn't put the air conditioning on. I didn't bring in any water. But like last night, I was telling your producer we were sent a message to say that we should prepare enough supplies that we can survive 72 hours in a protected space. And this is the protected space. So I've got in here, well, I should have in here some water, but I think it's actually not in here. It's still in the fridge. I'm not so frightened because I trust in Israel to protect me. And I'm very grateful that I have this room. But if I was in another building around the corner or my neighbours next door, I wouldn't have this room. This is a new building. Israel's in the process of replacing old buildings with new buildings, but it takes time. So I would be in a stairwell right now with babies and children. Yeah. So it would be much more scary. And I am extremely fortunate that I'm home. I mean, a couple of hours ago, I was out buying the supplies they told me to buy. And if this had happened, I would have been much more scared. So you've got me on a good one because I'm home and I'm safe. But
well, Natalie, let us update you with what we're getting. We've just got the live shots from Gaza where there are plumes of smoke. So it appears that there have been airstrikes in retaliation or trying to take out perhaps those rocket launchers where we saw the rockets being launched. Also in the south, we're being told the sirens have sounded in Ashkelon with rockets from Gaza being launched there as well. So you are not alone at the moment. But clearly, as far as you're concerned and others in Tel Aviv, it appears that Iron Dome, the defence system, has worked.
It seems so. I mean, certainly on my street. But usually what happens is after the siren, so the siren sounds for 90 seconds in Tel Aviv, which means you have 90 seconds to get to your shelter, which we had some spare time. You could see it took me about 30 seconds. Had to close when the Wi-Fi cut out, because this room has its own private Wi-Fi network that can deal with the steel door and the steel window, because I am now in basically a bomb shelter. I had to close the window. That was when the Wi-Fi cut out. And then after that, you have the remainder of the 90 seconds. And then usually you hear a bang, which is if the rocket was in fact headed to Tel Aviv, the Iron Dome will intercept it and explode it overhead. On this occasion, I didn't hear a bang. So I don't know what that means. That means perhaps it wasn't headed here, or maybe because my room is so secure, I didn't hear it. I don't know. But yeah, and then I'm supposed to stay in here for 10 minutes. So my phone gave me a notification as well about that. Let's see what time. It did ring. It rang with an alert, but I'm not sure exactly what time it was. Oh yeah, Tel Aviv City Centre. That was at 3:22. So I still have to stay here for another 5 minutes. So that bang could come at any moment.
And like you say, Natalie, you are in a very modern building, in a modern apartment, but there must be so many buildings that aren't modern like yours.
Well, yeah, absolutely. If you look, I think your reporter earlier, was he called Charlie? So he was on the balcony, and I hope he's also seeked and found safety. But he was in a kind of, his backdrop was representative of Tel Aviv. It's something I talk about a lot, is the old and the new. There was a sort of half-finished new building on one side of him and a new building to the right of him, and then a middle building in the middle. And only one of those buildings would have this protected space in the individual apartments. The other night I was at a friend for dinner, and there was 2 sirens. And we had to carry his 2-year-old twins into the stairwell with his 12-year-old son. We had two 2-year-olds and a 12-year-old, a grandfather, and two dads, myself and a friend, and we all sheltered in the stairwell. And it was utterly terrifying. It was way louder than what you're hearing here, because again, I'm protected. Most buildings don't have it. We stood in a stairwell with a big old Bauhaus window and just hoped for the best. And then as soon as it finished, I ran home. And I was home for the next siren. It's really scary. I'm talking through it, which is calming me down, but it is a very horrible thing to live through.
Right. Natalie, thank you very much indeed for updating us there in Tel Aviv. Stay safe, of course, as we say, those sirens going off there, the explosions, Tel Aviv. Separately, we're being told sirens and missiles heading towards Ashkelon. This follows a warning from the armed wing of Hamas, the spokesman Abu Abaida, telling residents there to leave the area of Ashkelon by 5 p.m. tonight without giving any further details. So it is a fluid situation. We'll update you as we get more.
This is Liverpool and Sir Keir Starmer, who in the last few minutes has arrived for his keynote speech at the Labour Party conference. Are we all looking at a future Prime Minister, a Prime Minister in a year's time?
Yes, keynote speech expected at 2 o'clock. We'll have all the build-up to that. And an indication that he's going to be, again, talking about rebuilding Britain, new towns and pylons and other developments. All that coming up shortly. But first, let's get an update on all the news headlines with Aaron.
Hi there, it is 1:31. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. The UN is warning of a mounting humanitarian disaster in Gaza as Israel continues to target Hamas terrorists with waves of airstrikes. Israel struck hundreds of targets overnight. Apartment blocks, schools and mosques were also hit, forcing nearly 200,000 people to flee. The UN says Israel's siege of Gaza is illegal under international law, but also that the abduction of hostages by Hamas is forbidden. Supplies of water, food and electricity have been cut off to the 2.3 million people who live in the Gaza Strip. Its health ministry says at least 770 Palestinians have been killed and 4,000 injured since Saturday. And right now, plumes of smoke can be seen over the Gaza skyline. It's just after 3:30 in the afternoon there. Local authorities say the Rafah border crossing to Egypt has now been closed because of Israeli airstrikes in the area. That's the only exit point for civilians on the southern border. Separately, Israel says it has now retaken control of the Gaza border fence, which was stormed by Hamas gunmen. 900 Israelis have been killed since Saturday. Labour peer Lord Mandelson says Sir Keir Starmer may not be Tony Blair, but he is in touch with the British people. The leader of the opposition will address his party's conference shortly, where he'll promise to build a new Britain if Labour wins the next election.
Keir Starmer is not Tony Blair, but I said something else. He's the nearest thing to Tony Blair of any leader of the Labour Party since Blair.
Right.
He's a mainstream politician, you know. He's completely in touch with and connected with what people are thinking in the country. He's totally committed to restarting the economy, and he's not wobbly on defence and national security.
Amazon workers are set to strike for a total of 4 days next month, including Black Friday. That's one of the busiest shopping days of the year. The GMB union have announced workers at their site in Coventry will walk out between November 7th and 9th, as well as Black Friday, November the 24th, in a dispute over pay. It comes after Amazon announced it would be spending £170 million on pay rises for staff over the next 6 months. The global retail giant says minimum pay will increase by at least £1 per hour. More on all of our stories on our website. That's gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Quick look at the markets. The pound will buy you $1.2249, 1.1575 euros. The price of gold, £1,516 and 43 pence per ounce. The FTSE 100 is at 7,608 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom. GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back to the live desk, and let's get the latest now from the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, with Sir Keir Starmer due to speak in less than half an hour with that keynote address. Let's bring in our political editor, Chris Hope, who's awaiting, well, a set piece where I guess he's going to try and explain why people should vote for Labour rather than against the Conservatives.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. We're going to hear a lot more about Keir Starmer as the future Prime Minister. Not a lot of policy. We've been briefed overnight about the idea of new garden cities, the idea of building on more of the green belt, where it's not very green, more brown or grey belt, to be frank. But it's more, and there's no news on taxation. None of the kind of things you and I might judge a party on, and how a party can get GB News viewers richer. More about the person and trying to get some passion behind him. They do recognise, the team around him, that he can be seen as quite wooden. But I think they want to try and get the idea of this guy is a safe pair of hands, and not just for the next 5 years if they win the election, but the next 10 years. We've seen briefed overnight. They wanted the idea. They want to be a decade of national renewal. They've said, and they're making clear this party won't be the party of protest ever again. That's clearly a nod back to Jeremy Corbyn when the party was the party of protest. And I've been struck over the past few days how the cardigans have gone and the suits are back. And let me tell you, this hall is jam-packed, and we are 20 minutes away from the speaking. To get a ticket to come in, that you are allocated one by email before it even started. I'm a journalist, I can get in because I'm here to cover it for our viewers, but it really is popular. There's a momentum feeling about the Labour Party, which just wasn't there last week at the Tory Party conference, Mark.
We saw Sir Keir Starmer arriving with his wife Victoria a few moments ago. Is there any chance we might hear from her first, like we did from Rishi Sunak's wife Akshata last week?
I think that's right. I mean, Pippa, you're right, of course. Victoria, his wife, is the person behind the throne, the person who is supporting Sir Keir, his leadership. Is an NHS worker in her own right. We don't know much about her. It could well be that she comes on stage to introduce Sir Keir, because, of course, Sarah Brown introduced Gordon Brown back in 2009 before that election, but, of course, Labour went on to lose. And we saw last week, didn't we, how Akshata Murty emerged with a speech from notes, no auto cue, very confident. So I think you can imagine people wanting Victoria Starmer to come out and say some words about her husband, Sir Keir, but we'll wait and see. What is clear, though, is the children are never named. We don't name ever in reporting Sir Keir Starmer's children. He keeps his family very private, and I'm told that's really Victoria. She wants to give them a normal upbringing, and that's fair. But I think the idea of showing more about the man behind the leadership is what will happen in a few minutes' time here in Liverpool.
And is there going to be a bit of back to the future? We had this extraordinary moment when Peter Mandelson shared his thoughts on the GB News stand there about, is it 1997 Part 2?
That's right. There's lots of talk, isn't there, about what is the influence of Peter Mandelson and indeed Tony Blair. Now, I saw, as you did, Mark and Pippa, Peter Mandelson on the front row with the shadow cabinet applauding along as though he's part of the government. He's not part of the government. He's a Labour peer who's got his own interests. I mean, when I interviewed him for my podcast before last year, he said to me, there's not a day goes by when I don't miss being in power. And he's everywhere here at the party conference. He even named on air, didn't he, those 5 pledges from Sir Keir Starmer, which not many people know. He'd obviously learned them. He wants to be part of the team around Starmer. And if you were Starmer, I mean, I know he carries baggage, Peter Mandelson, but he's a supreme strategist. And you'd want somebody who knows how to win a landslide. And he was the arch strategist back in the late 80s, early 90s, which helped propel Tony Blair to that landslide. So you'd want him around you.
Political editor Christopher Hope inside the conference hall where we are waiting for Sir Keir Starmer to appear in the next few minutes. Thank you. Now, GB News' political correspondent Catherine Forster is just outside the conference hall, and you should hopefully be able to tell us what people there are saying. How excited are they to hear what Sir Keir Starmer is going to tell them?
It really is absolutely buzzing here in Liverpool today. Labour really feeling very buoyant. That 20-point lead seems to be set firm. There's an optimism, there's an energy here that Labour really feel that they are, at last, after 13 years, back on the path to government. Now, it's an astonishing reversal of fortunes, isn't it? Because it's only 3 years since Jeremy Corbyn led Labour to its worst defeat since 1935. And at the point that Sir Keir Starmer took over the party, it was seen as a 10-year project. Basically, everybody thought, well, there's no way on earth he can turn it around. It's going to take 10 years. And yet here we are. This may well be his last conference before he, if the polls are to be believed, and of course a lot can change and change very fast, this time next year, he potentially could be Prime Minister. I was at Conservative conference last week, and the mood, I have to say here, is entirely different. There is an energy, there is a momentum, there is a feeling that they are on the cusp of power. Now, of course, they're being very cautious about it, but there is a real optimism. Now, there was a queue here all the way along. Now it's gone in, but for well over an hour. There were people queuing all the way down along here, 3, 4, 5 deep, waiting patiently to get a spot inside the hall, as you will have seen over the last couple of days for Angela Rayner and the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves. This is a massive space. There's a huge number of seats. I would say it's at least 3 times probably that was used for the Conservative conference, and there were many, many empty seats last week, apart from for Rishi Sunak. Now, for Angela Rayner, it was rammed. There were hundreds of people standing. Rachel Reeves, yesterday, there was a cheer so loud when Rachel Reeves announced the COVID corruption commissioner, so loud that it was almost impossible to hear what she was saying. So we're expecting Sir Keir Starmer. There's going to be, again, can already see very large numbers of people standing, and we anticipate probably about 45 minutes, laying out his plans for a decade of national renewal. They think if they can get into power, they're likely to stay there for 10 years, promising to give Britain its future back. Rather punchier as a slogan than the Conservatives, which was long-term decisions for a brighter future. So all eyes now on Labour leader Keir Starmer to see what he says.
And just to sort of reiterate that he's trying to explain to people why they should vote for Labour rather than against the Conservatives. This is no longer being seen as a party in opposition, effectively.
Yes, they really want to be seen as a government in waiting. And when Sir Keir Starmer took the party, they had a 3-pronged phases, if you like, to what they wanted to do. The first thing was take control of the Labour Party, kick out all the people on the far left, all the very strict Corbyn supporters. Of course, Jeremy Corbyn has had the whip withdrawn, doesn't even have a conference passed, drive out anti-Semitism, etc. Then the second thing was to highlight the record of the Conservatives over the last 13 years. And the last part that we're now entering entering is, if not the Conservatives, why Labour? That's the essay question that they've sort of set themselves to answer. They want people to have a positive reason to vote for them, not just that they're fed up with a Conservative. So all these pledges about building infrastructure, green infrastructure from Rachel Reeves, but today, building houses. We know, of course, there's a chronic housing shortage in this country. That's obviously going to appeal to lots of people. But Keir Starmer's speech expected to focus on making things better for working people and doing that up and down the country wherever you live. So lots of anticipation, lots of excitement, and we'll be going to his speech very shortly.
OK, thank you very much, Catherine. For the moment, back to you, of course, as that gets underway shortly. But let's just update you with the latest we're getting from Israel and indeed Gaza, because Reuters is reporting that an Israeli airstrike has killed 2 senior Hamas officials in Gaza, according to an official. No further details on that, but that's just literally come through in the past minute.
And we have also heard that Hamas is warning Israeli citizens in Ashkelon, that's in southern Israel, near to the Gaza Strip, warning citizens to leave their homes before 5 p.m. There is footage coming in which shows rockets from Gaza fired over Israeli troops and tanks, but they were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome anti-missile system.
And as we were updating, of course, we were hearing those sirens going off in Tel Aviv, suggestions rockets were being intercepted there, as well as these ones in the south of the country over Ashkelon. Well, Hamas has said it will not negotiate while the airstrikes from the Israeli side continue on Gaza. The Israeli Air Force indicating they carried out some 200 overnight. We've seen more plumes of smoke, too, in the last hour. And the Hamas announcement saying they would threaten to kill 1 captive for every Palestinian home bombed without warning.
Among the families believed to be held captive is this Israeli mother and her 2 young sons. There are believed to be some 130 Israeli hostages being held in Gaza. Latest reports in Israel say the death toll from the Hamas attacks has reached 900 people, whilst Israeli retaliation has claimed the lives of almost 700 Palestinians. Charlie Peters, who is live for us shortly in Tel Aviv, he can bring us this report now.
Executing innocents in their homes. This is the moment Hamas terrorists stormed a small community in Israel. They pushed through the gates on motorbikes with rifles on their backs. Footage acquired by the South First responders showed terrorists looting dead bodies. They have since been ejected by Israeli forces. RPGs and rifles are littered among children's toys and garden furniture as Israeli forces survey the devastation. Over 100 bodies have already been recovered, according to local humanitarian agencies, after militants rampaged through the unprotected village. That's roughly 10% of the tiny farming community's population. This location was among the worst affected areas when Hamas stormed Israel on Saturday, with the Israelis now claiming to have re-established control of all of its communities surrounding Gaza. Israeli forces are now expected to focus their attention on Gaza, where Hamas militants are holding dozens of hostages and firing more rocket attacks into Israel.
Charlie Peters there updating us. More live from Charlie shortly. But as we were being updated from Reuters, indicating that Ashkelon, the southern port city, the warning to Israeli civilians there from Hamas to get out now. And certainly there are some pictures coming through of the rockets being fired from Gaza over Ashkelon as well as Tel Aviv. But it is a changing situation. But back here in the UK, the conflict, it's been translated into both protests and vigils, with a pro-Palestine demonstration taking place near the Israeli embassy in London last night. Let's go there live now and speak to our reporter, Ray Addison. Ray, quiet there now, but clearly we can see from behind you they've put some fairly robust fences in position.
Absolutely, yes. Hundreds of people took part in that protest yesterday. They were waving placards saying, quote, end the occupation. They were letting off fireworks, lighting flares as well, and chanting Free Palestine. Met Police confirmed that there were 3 arrests across London, 2 within this area alone, and charges included racially motivated criminal damage and possession of an offensive weapon. And as you've been saying, we can still see the effects of that event here today. These heavy-duty barricade put in just yesterday before that protest. It's not normally here, severely limiting access to this area. The heavy-duty gate behind me as well, that's been locked, unlocked as police have been coming and going. There's been an armed police presence, police on motorcycles as well. And we can see some of the effects of that protest. Bits of litter, stickers, Free Palestine stickers sort of littering the road, graffiti daubing some of the buildings as well. And police telling us that they anticipate a larger protest potentially this coming weekend on Saturday. Now, about 45 minutes ago or so, as we were standing here, a car drove past with a Palestinian flag coming out of one of the windows. It turned in the middle of the road and then came back and drove past the entrance to this private road which leads to the Israeli embassy, again as though to make that point and make some kind of statement. I spoke to one local Jewish resident and I asked him how it made him feel, and he actually said they have a right to do that as long as what they're doing does not descend or provoke any kind of violence. And he said that the UK, in his opinion, is the best country for race relations, and he hopes that the events over this week will not lead to any kind of disintegration of that situation. However, he of course described the attack by the Hamas terrorist organization as beyond barbarism. I also spoke to one young woman who works in one of the companies based along this private road, and she was saying that HR have sent an email to all of the staff saying if they don't feel safe, they should work from home and they don't have to come in. Of course, shopkeepers as well, who I've been speaking to, say that they fear that these protests could just spark up again and could continue to happen over the coming days as this conflict proceeds. Now, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, obviously has spoken to the Met Police, and she's urged them to increase their presence in communities, in large Jewish communities. They're doing that. They say they have a zero tolerance for any hate crimes. And the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, urging supporters of Palestine to stay at home and saying there's just no need to come out because it just causes distress.
We're watching the situation closely. Ray Addison, thank you very much for that. And just very quickly, UK aid charities, they're calling for an urgent de-escalation in the conflict. There's claims that ambulances carrying the injured through Gaza, they have been hit by airstrikes.
And in addition, just to reflect on what Ray was saying there, James Cleverly, our Foreign Secretary, of course, earlier saying a significant number of British Israeli nationals had been caught in the conflict. No exact details in terms of numbers from the Foreign Office, but we'll update you as we get more on that.
In just a few moments, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer will be making his big speech at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. We will be looking at a future Prime Minister. Stay with us.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Outbreaks of rain today across northern parts of the UK. It does clear through during the evening and overnight, and it stays fine in the south today before rain arrives here during the next few days. We've got some weather fronts pushing in, and they are mainly affecting the far north of England, Scotland and Northern Ireland during the evening and the first part of the night. The rain falling onto saturated and in places flooded ground in western Scotland could cause issues, but eventually central belt northwards clears the rain, followed by strong winds and frequent showers. But it's really across Northern Ireland, Northern England, parts of Wales where we'll see that wet weather effect through the night. In the far south, a lot of low cloud and mist returns, so a gloomy start once again here. And that cloud will take some time to lift and break. A few light showers coming along for southern counties of England. But the wettest weather actually for tomorrow will be across Wales, the Midlands, East Anglia, some heavy outbreaks of rain, particularly for the Welsh mountains. Clearer skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, albeit windy, with quite a few showers in the north and northwest of Scotland, and feeling much colder here actually, with 10 to 13 Celsius. A bright start though for much of northern UK on Thursday. Perhaps a touch of frost in places. In the south, we've got cloud and outbreaks of rain pushing through. That does clear later, so Thursday's mostly fine for.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back to the Live Desk with a big live event due to start in Liverpool fairly imminently because it is the key speech from Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer at his party conference and indications that he will be eyeing at least 2 terms in power as a Prime Minister in waiting.
Well, a key aim of his speech is to give voters a reason to back Labour in the next general election, expected to be in around a year's time, rather than give them reasons to vote against Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives. He is due on stage very shortly. We will be able to take you live to Liverpool. And he has been seen in the last few minutes, accompanied by his wife, Victoria, as he made his way into the conference hall. Will we have an introduction by his wife, like we had an introduction by Rishi Sunak's wife last week, which was pretty gushing?
We did have an introduction from a certain Peter Mandelson on the GB News stand in Liverpool earlier, indicating that there may well be shades of 1997 and the Blairite part of the party, with the applause there. Rachel Reeves, of course, in the front there, who had that speech talking about rebuilding Britain yesterday as Shadow Chancellor, and an indication that theme may well be amplified by Sir Keir, talking about a decade of national renewal and that Labour could be in government until the 2030s, expected to announce a new generation, for instance, of large towns and suburbs, Georgian-style townhouses with compulsory purchase powers, and of course the whole issue of renewable green energy, more pylons being built, more electricity lines, and certainly getting Britain back moving again.
Yeah, Labour at this conference over the last few days really does seem to be re-energised. They are ahead in the polls. There's also, of course, been those by-election victories, which has only made the party's conference grow. And you have to ask, why are they so far ahead? Is it because of Sir Keir Starmer and he's providing a certain excitement for voters? Or is it because so many people are now thoroughly unhappy with the Conservatives? Well, Sir Keir Starmer will be on that stage very shortly to explain why he should be the next Prime Minister. This could well be his last speech before the general election expected in a year's time.
Yeah, and we saw Ed Miliband there, of course, who is in charge of energy policy. Still suggestions that a certain David Miliband might be coming back as well to join this new look Labour Party. We won't call it New Labour because, of course, that is dating back to 1997. But certainly Peter Mandelson giving his assessment that this is the best leader, in his view, since Tony Blair, and an indication that, of course, Sir Keir Starmer will want to take this sort of fairly centrist position in terms of the economy, certainly, but an indication that there's a job of work to be done. The latest from the IMF, that Britain's economy will have its growth downgraded from an expected 1% growth in GDP next year to 0.6% as interest rates take a hit on the economic performance. Although we did hear from Liam Halligan, of course, at the conference, that IMF assessments of the UK economy had been slightly wide of the mark in these recent assessments.
Pessimistic, some people might say.
You may say that.
Here
I can
is
possibly comment.
The Labour leader. Big keynote speech. Well, he'll be proposing a community policing guarantee, and that means guaranteeing patrols through 13,000 more neighbourhood police and police community support officers on the streets. This speech is the third day of the Labour Party conference. We've heard from many other shadow ministers so far, including Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who was widely applauded yesterday. It'll be interesting to see if Sir Keir Starmer gets the same reception with his plans for the country.
We're likely to get perhaps an echo of Tony Blair's 1993 conference speech on, you remember, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime, with a plan perhaps to set up 90 new youth hubs to give teenagers the best start in life and stop the knife crime that is killing our children. That was outlined by Yvette Cooper a little earlier, the Shadow Home Secretary. But also, we're being told this idea of a next generation of new towns, extra powers for local mayors. But this is Sir Keir Starmer's moment in the spotlight.
Thank you. Thank you, conference. Thank you, conference.
True democracy is citizen-led. Politics needs an update. We demand a people's house. We demand a people's house. We are in crisis. We are in crisis. Our whole future is in jeopardy.
It's of Sir Keir Starmer arriving on stage there, a protest being taken away by stewards fairly rapidly, dragged indeed by the arm and the collar there. And we will wait to hear what Sir Keir responds in terms of that interruption, and clearly questions about the security in Liverpool as he brushes off his sleeve there. Don't quite know what's been put over it, whether it's water or some other kind of liquid, or is it glitter? He's going to remove the jacket anyway and carry on shirt sleeves, which, well, yes, is perhaps Tony Blair's style, we remember, all those years ago. Rolling up his sleeves for the job now.
Definitely looking a little bit more relaxed without his jacket. And whoever was on stage, that is tough now to deliver a speech after what has just happened. But let's see how he does.
Thank you. Thank you, conference. Thank you. Thank you, conference. If he thinks that bothers me, he doesn't know me. Protest or power, that's why we changed our party, conference. That's why we changed our party. Thank you. And it was just as well it was me, because my wife's dress is really beautiful. Thank you, Marie, for those words. My mum would have loved to have been here and to have heard you saying those words. Thank you so much for doing me that honour. And thank you, conference. Thank you for that reception. It is fantastic to be here with you in Liverpool again. And now, before I get going, I know what you're thinking. Please, 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 no more Arsenal jokes. And I think you're right. But, conference, I do want to offer my sympathies to Manchester. No, not for that reason, but because I really do feel for any city that had to host that circus last week. Honestly. What can you say about a Prime Minister who goes to Manchester to cancel Manchester's train line? The self-declared champion of motorists who had to borrow a car for a photo op. A man who keeps a very close watch on the cost of living crisis from the vantage point of a short-haul helicopter. Conference, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm beginning to see why Liz Truss won. Although I still think we'd have been better off without lettuce, actually. But it's been 13 years now. And what does Britain have to show for it? Where is their minimum wage? Where is their Shore Strike? Crime down by a third, more students than ever, devolution, the shortest NHS waiting list in history, 500,000 out of child poverty, peace in Northern Ireland. I'm not going to do the whole list. I haven't got time. But isn't the contrast stark? 13 years of things can only get better versus 13 years of things have only got worse. Conference, this is what we have to fight. The Tory project to kick the hope out of this country, drain the reservoirs of our belief. That's why I started with our achievement. I wanted to remind everyone that there was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, when questions such as, is Britain destined for decline, would have felt ridiculous even to ask. And I have to warn you, our way back from this will be hard. But know this, what is broken can be repaired. What is ruined can be rebuilt. Wounds do heal. And ultimately, that project, their project, will crash against the spirit of working people in this country, and they are the source of my hope. Because there are two stories of the past 13 years. A Westminster of chaos and crisis, 5 prime ministers in 7 years. And then the other side, a Britain where working people never let each other down. In fact, whenever they were asked, they dug deep for this, came together for this country. And that's the cruelest cost of these 13 years of decline. But a government this week can winnow the confidence of a proud nation, undermine our foundations with the gnawing rot of despair. A sense that government cannot achieve great things, that Britain cannot achieve great things. But I believe in this country. I believe in its spirit, in its people, in its businesses, in its communities. I don't just see the sewage in our streams and seas. I see the volunteers, people who love their community, standing up to fight for clean water. I don't just see the crumbling concrete in our schools. I see the teachers in the temporary classrooms still giving our children the education they need. I don't just see the boards going up in our high streets. I see the businesses, the pubs, the cafes, still trading, still finding a way through the chaos, still serving their community. That's the real Britain Conference. Millions of people who've looked at the Tory circus and said, fine, we'll get on with it ourselves. And I say, let's stand with them. Give them the government they deserve. Turn our backs on never-ending Tory decline with a decade of national renewal. Do not doubt that the fire of change still burns in Britain. The question is whether it lives on inside Labour, and today we show it does. Today we turn the page, answer the question, why Labour? With a plan for a Britain built to last, with higher growth, safer streets, cheap British power in your home, more opportunity in your community, the NHS off its knees, a Britain with its future back. It will require an entirely new approach to politics. Mission government, new priorities, totally focused on the interests of working people. 5 national missions, all fixed on a single-minded purpose, to govern for the long term, end the Tory disease of sticking plaster politics with a simple Labour philosophy that together we fix tomorrow's challenges today.
And conference, this new path can only be walked by a new party, a changed Labour Party, no longer enthralled to gesture politics, no longer a party of protest, a party of service. Rebuilt, renewed, reconnected to an old partnership, a bargain, that we serve working people as they drive our country forward. And that's why we had to change so fast, why we had to fight so hard to change this party. The bond of respect that comes from service is special. National renewal depends on it. That's why we stood with NATO, a historic achievement of this party, held out our hand to business, ripped anti-Semitism out by the roots, backed Ukraine, country first, party second. Thank you, conference. Thank you. Conference, I am shocked and appalled by the events in Israel. I utterly condemn the senseless murder of men, women and children, including British citizens, in cold blood by the terrorists of Hamas. This party... This party believes in the two-state solution, a Palestinian state alongside a safe and secure Israel. But this action by Hamas does nothing for Palestinians, and Israel must always have the right to defend her people. Conference, these events, the war in Ukraine, they show precisely the test of our era. The world is becoming a more volatile place. Revolutions in energy, science, technology are reshaping the global economy. The race is on for the new job, the new supply chains, the new industries that will emerge. Climate change is a recipe for instability. We've seen that on our TV screens all summer. Terrorism, the movement of people, criminal gangs who exploit their vulnerability. They're all challenges we must confront. And through all this, because of all this, democratic rules, democratic values, democratic certainties are under attack. A new age of insecurity, with fault lines that run right through the living standards of working people. But look, as we've seen throughout our history, where there is change, there is also possibility. Possibility in industry, in winning the race for the jobs of the future. Possibility in technology, innovations like gene editing that will save countless lives. Possibility in four nations, standing together, no longer distracted or divided. And possibility in working people, in parts of our country ignored, passed over, disregarded as sources of growth and dynamism, but with the potential ready to be unlocked. It boils down to this. Can we look the challenges of this age squarely in the eye, and amidst all the change and insecurity, find the hunger to win new opportunities and the strength to conserve what is precious? Because, conference, I tell you, that is what Britain needs, and that is what we must become. People are looking at us because they want our wounds to heal, and we are the healers. People are looking to us because these challenges require a modern state, and we are the modernizers. People are looking to us because they want to build a new Britain, and we are the builders. But they also look out at the chaos in the world and in Westminster, and they want to know, can we find that elusive path to an economy that serves their community? Can we deliver the rock of stability they need to move forward with their lives, shelter from the storm, and a passage to calmer waters? Because, conference, we should never forget that politics should tread lightly on people's lives. But our job is to shoulder the burden for working people, carry the load, not add. This year I went on holiday to the Lake District with my family. We were sitting in a pub near Windermere. I was eating fish and chips. Vic had the plant burger. You see, we don't focus group everything. Anyway, we were sitting there. It was calm. It was beautiful. The Lake District never lets you down. I went there every year as a child with my family. And although she struggled so much to walk, my mum loved the lake. So it was really special to share it with my kids. And if you can believe it, it was sunny this summer. But the reason I remember it, the privilege of it, is because on my first day back from holiday, I was in a cafe in Worthing in Sussex, talking to people, and what one woman said really stuck in my mind. She was a single mum with 2 kids. And she said to me, it's survival mode. I can't think, oh, let's do something nice. There's no long-term planning, no thinking about the future. And I could see the hurt in her eyes as she told me. That's what this cost of living crisis does. It intrudes on the little things that we love, whittles away at our joy, days out, meals out, holidays, the first things that people cut back on, picking up a treat in the supermarket, just to put it back on the shelf. Conference, we have to be a government that takes care of the big decisions, so working people have the freedom to enjoy what they love, or time. More time, more energy, more possibility, more life. It could be football, fishing, or just a quiet time with your family. But we all need that. We all need the ability to look forward, to move forward, free from anxiety. That's what getting our future back really means. But look, conference, here's what we can't do. We can't take advantage, because it's exactly in moments like this, when people want change, need change, cry out for change, that the hope of the easy answer can prosper. And conference, we cannot be about that. Changing a country is not like ticking a box. It's not the click of a mouse. Long-term solutions are not oven-ready. If you think our job in 1997 was to rebuild a crumbling public realm, that in 1964 it was to modernise an economy left behind by the pace of technology, that in 1945 to build a new Britain out of the trauma of collective sacrifice, then in 2024 it will have to be all three. All three. Conference, and at a time when our politics feels broken, when our public services are broken, our public finances wrecked, the Tory mortgage bombshell that's blown up the finances of millions. Nurses, teaching assistants, builders, drivers, shop workers, carers, people who never before missed a payment in their life, working harder than ever for the wage in their pocket, and who now find themselves walking a little more slowly past the food bank in their town. The age of insecurity loaded onto the backs of working people. But there's no magic wand here. A decade of national renewal. That's what it will take. We will need ambition, determination, patience, absolutely, but also bravery, because it's brave to reject the hope of the easy answer, courageous to choose instead the hope of the hard road. But if we give Britain the certain destination, if we walk step by step with working people, bulldoze through the barriers in their way, lay secure foundations at their feet, mission government our guide, then yes, we can get our future back. So let's set the course. Let's get Britain building again. Take back our streets. Switch on great British energy. Tear down the barriers to opportunity. Get our NHS back on its feet. And today, another step along that road, an answer to the outrage that is 7.5 million people waiting for treatment on our NHS. People like Hamza Semakula. He's a semi-pro footballer who plays for Hendon in the Southern League. Last year, he tore his knee ligament very badly, and that left him with a choice of paying £15,000 to go private or abandoning his career, his love, his joy. Now, Hamza actually crowdfunded his operation in the end. The British people dug deep and got him back on the pitch. And he's back in the goals as well. He scored in the FA Cup this season. But honestly, how has it come to this? Working people paying for their own healthcare in a cost of living crisis. Pensioners waiting weeks, months, sometimes waiting years, just for the care that they need. No, the whole point of our NHS is to be the crowd-funded solution for all of us. That's the fundamental principle. And at the next election, it's on the line. The Conservative Party that brought our NHS to its knees will put it in the ground. We have got to get it back on its feet. Thank you, Conference. Thank you, Conference. Thank you. The non-dom tax state is a legal loophole that allows some of the richest people in the world to avoid paying tax in Britain. That's money we could invest in our NHS. That's always been our priority. And right now, the biggest challenge is cutting waiting lists. So we will invest that money in boosting capacity. We will get the NHS working round the clock, and we will pay staff properly to do it. More operations, more appointments, more diagnostic tests. You will be seen more clearly in an NHS clearing the backlog 7 days a week. But Conference, do not doubt the hard road either. Because if all we do is place the NHS on a pedestal, then I'm afraid it will remain on life support. I know some people don't like the word reform, but I tell you now, there's no other option. We must be the government that finally transforms our NHS. We can't go on like this. We can't go on with a sickness service. We need an NHS that prevents illness, keeps people healthy and out of hospital in the first place. We must use technology to overhaul every aspect of delivery, move care closer to community, deploy the power of artificial intelligence to spot disease quickly. Mental health treatment when you need it, we'll guarantee that. The 8 a.m. scramble for the GP appointment, we'll end it. Dangerous waits for cancer diagnosis, we will consign them to history. But conference. Here's the bigger lesson. Because what is true of our NHS is true right across the board. We're not here to manage the shop. We're here to make government more dynamic, more joined up, more strategic, focused at all times and without exception on long-term national renewal. Mission government. It's not about size, it's about capacity. A more powerful engine, not a bigger car. A reforming state, not a checkbook state. Now, people will say, don't rock the boat. We've always done it like this. Is this really necessary? I've reformed a public service before. I know how it goes. But it's our responsibility to do it. And across our public services, the prize is huge. Because if we call time on wasteful police procurement, then we can have a community policing guarantee, more police in your town, fighting antisocial behaviour and taking our streets back. If we ignore the appeals for the status quo on private school tax breaks or outdated national curriculum, then we can have mental health staff in every school, more expert teachers in the classroom, more creativity, speaking skills, confidence, shatter the class ceiling at source. And if we want to challenge the hoarding of potential in our economy, then we must win the war against the hoarders in Westminster. Give power back and put communities in control. That's mission government. But conference, it also has to be something more, a deeper bond, a partnership between people and politics that in our age, after these 13 years of decline, will be hard to renew. Some people say to me, it's about honesty, isn't it? We were lied to. These politicians were liars. But, you know, that's not it. Well, maybe for one of them, it actually was it. But for people like Rishi Sunak, it's more that they cannot see the country before them. The walls of Westminster are so high. The view that your lives, your services, your future are just pieces on their board. That's so deeply ingrained in their mindset. They have no way to understand what you've been through. You know, they actually believe what comes out of their mouths. When your public services were cut to the bone and they said, we're all in it together. When they told you to your face that Brexit would only bring benefits for your business. When they say now that they're taking tough decisions for you in this cost of living crisis. They've convinced themselves that this is what they're really doing. They can't see Britain, not your Britain. Can't accept that every time your interests were on the line, they made you pay. But when it's people like them, they look after themselves. Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak and the shallow men and women of Westminster, unable to see, unable to listen, unable to stand in your shoes and serve this country. And they won't change. They can't change. Couldn't even change during a pandemic, when our country came together to follow rules that they set and they broke. Conference, my sister is a care worker. She was a care worker during the pandemic. 14-hour shift, often overnight, unimaginable pressure. And the reward, a struggle every week, I mean every week, just to make ends meet. But it's not just about that. It's also about respect. Working people never let each other down. And in the pandemic, the British people didn't let them down. The bond of respect was there. That's why we clapped. Britain knew exactly who was serving it in its time of need. And for me, that's the biggest frustration. Not the pitiful reward the government gave for that service, but also the countless missed opportunities to deepen that bond. Use it to change our country. Because I believe this country respects itself. I believe the British people respect each other. And I believe that if people see that respect, see that service in their politics, then they will commit to the mission of national renewal. Let me put it this way. At some point in your life, many people here will have heard a nagging voice inside saying, no, this isn't for you. You don't belong here. You can't do that. Working class people certainly hear that voice. Trust me. In some ways, it's the hardest class ceiling of all. But imagine if a whole country said, you do belong. Imagine if a whole country said, we back your potential. Imagine if a whole country commits properly to unlocking the pride you have in your community. Then look what we could build. A country where every contribution is equally respected. Where you don't have to change who you are just to get on. Where whatever your background, you feel secure, valued, certain that things will be better for your children. Thank you, Constance. Thank you. A Britain strong enough, stable enough, secure enough for you to invest your hope, your possibility, your future. A Britain built to last, where working people are respected, crime is prosecuted, ambulances come, the minimum wage is enforced, infrastructure gets built, children feel safe in their classrooms, businesses and workers unite in partnership, fight for the jobs of the future, jobs that are well paid and in your town, and where MPs have only one job, service. No more. No more bonuses for people pumping sewage into our rivers. No more pensioners. No more pensioners freezing while energy firms make record profits. No more government contracts awarded by the back door. No more cleaners mocked as they scrub mess off the walls of illegal parties in Westminster. Thank you, Tom. A future where we believe workers' rights are good for growth. Inequality corrosive. Communities should have a bigger stake. Climate change is an opportunity we can't pass up. Young people's aspirations must be met. Britain is respected around the world again. That's our future conference. Let's get it back. Because government can be a force for good. We can fight alongside working people in the name of justice and opportunity. That's why I came into politics. I've looked into the eyes of the people that we must serve at the Crown Prosecution Service, in my work in Northern Ireland, and I've seen reflected back the knowledge that government can make or break a life. It's that responsibility that drives me on towards the reforms I know we must make, the Britain I know we must build. So let's get to work, because there is one barrier so big, so imposing, that it blocks out all light from the other side. A blockage that stops this country building roads, grid connections, laboratories, train lines, warehouses, wind farms, power stations. An obstacle to the aspirations of millions, now and in the future, who deserve the security of home ownership. A future hidden by our restrictive planning system. And conference, we must bulldoze through it. We used to call it the dream of home ownership, didn't we? We used to say it glibly on stages like this. But look at Britain now. It has become a dream. It's out of reach for millions. And if we don't take action, it will only become more distant. A luxury for the few, not the privilege of the many. And look, I'm trying really hard not to mention the house I grew up in again. But seriously, that Pebble Dash semi was everything to my family. It gave us stability through the cost of living crisis in the 70s. It served as the springboard for the journey I've been on in my life. And I believe every family deserves the same. To have made that aspiration harder for working people, that's been a disaster for our economy and for the unity of this country. So today we launch a new plan to get Britain building again, a signal of our determination to fight the blockers who hold a veto over British aspiration. No more land bankers sitting comfortably on brownfield sites while rents in their communities rise. No more councils refusing to develop a local plan because they prefer the backdoor deal. No more inertia in the face of resistance, and there will be resistance from people who say, no, we don't want Britain's future here. My message to them is this: a future must be built. That is the responsibility of serious government. And if we continually wash our hands of this task, we all end up in a rut, just like now. So it's time to get Britain building again. It's time to build 1.5 million new homes across the country. Opportunities for first-time buyers in every community. New development corporations with the power to remove the blockages. New infrastructure to support families and communities to grow. Roads, tunnels, power stations built quicker and cheaper. And a new effort to rewire Britain. The national grid moving faster, a lot faster, laying the cables our future prosperity needs. It's a future with more beautiful cities, more prosperous towns, new parks, green spaces, new public services, all aligned with our plan. And conference, sometimes the old Labour ideas are right for new times. So where there are good jobs, where there is good infrastructure, where there's good land for affordable homes, we'll get shovels in the ground, cranes in the sky, and build the next generation of Labour new towns. Thank you. Thank you, Conference. And no, this doesn't mean we're tearing up the green belt. Labour is the party that protects our green spaces. No party fights harder for our environment. We created the national park, created the green belt in the first place. I grew up in Surrey. But where there are clearly ridiculous uses of disused car parks, dreary wastelands, not a green belt, a grey belt, sometimes within a city's boundary, then this cannot be justified as a reason to hold our future back. We will take this fight on. That's a Britain built to last. And here's why. Because getting Britain building again is critical for economic growth, our most important mission, and also a means, a way to soften that hard road, deliver on national renewal, and escape the cost of living crisis permanently. And that is why this Labour Party will fight the next election on economic growth. An economy that works for the whole country is what the British people want. The Tories know that. They stood at this crossroads before. They called it levelling up. But as soon as they counted their votes, they turned back. Back to the comfort of the easy answer. Back to the trickle-down nonsense that sees wealth trickle up and jobs trickle out. You cannot understate this. Those ideas are finished. Blown away by a world where tyrants like Putin pay little regard to the niceties of market dogma, but also because in the end, they always make working people pay. You saw it last year. Tax cuts for the richest, the pound sinking like a stone, a wrecking ball to our finances, economic shrapnel everywhere, family budget shredded, a £300 billion bill, the only remedy, Labour stability. You know, I never thought I would hear a modern Conservative Prime Minister that 50% of our children going to university was a false dream. My dad felt the disrespect of vocational skills all his life, but the solution is not and never will be the levelling down of working class aspiration to go to university. But conference. But conference, this is the Tory mindset now. Don't solve problems, exploit them. So if you are a Conservative voter who despairs of this, if you look in horror at the descent of your party into the murky waters of populism and conspiracy, with no argument for economic change. If you feel our country needs a party that can serve, that fights for our union, our environment, the rule of law, family life, the careful bond between this generation and the next, then let me tell you, Britain already has one, and you can join it. It's this Labour Party. Thank you, conference. And this is our mission. Every new era of growth must start with an expansion of the country's productive capabilities. That is an iron law. But what isn't an iron law is who that growth benefits. Back in the 80s, the Tories gave us the financial Big Bang, and we're still counting the cost. Wealth and opportunity concentrated in the hands of the few. Our Labour era will instead unleash the big build, and the winners this time will be working people everywhere. That's a Britain built to last. And conference, it is a new way. Unlike the Tories, we won't be dragged back to the easy answers. The barriers of dogma will not block our path. That's why we hold out the hand of partnership to business, champion the need for a competitive tax regime, understand that private enterprise is the only way this country pays its way in the world. And at the same time, we scrap 0 hours contracts. We end fire and we hire. Make work pay with a real living wage and say unambiguously, this is good for growth. We say yes to sound money, yes to cutting waste and debt, embrace the need for stability. Fiscal responsibility is non-negotiable. And if investment can kickstart growth, if investment can save money in the long run, can protect jobs, create jobs, crowd in billions of private investment, then yes, we must get on and do it. And look, business is ready to join us in this endeavour. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with leading CEOs who tell me it's the chopping and changing, the sticking plaster politics, the chaos that is holding back investment in our country. That's why we'll set up the National Wealth Fund, work hand in glove with the private sector to rebuild this country. But as we share the risk, we must also share the rewards. So we will make sure that the British people retain a stake in our investment. This is our mantra. The fight for the future must go hand in hand with the fight for every pound. That's a Britain built to last. Not state control, not pure free markets, but a genuine partnership, sleeves rolled up, working for the national interest, worker and business, public and private, building a bridge from the jobs we must protect today to the opportunities we have to win for tomorrow. That's why the global crisis of the last 13 years have been so painful for Britain. The stand-aside state that leaves nobody with the future they want because there's no direction. An irresponsibility towards the future that defies the values Conservatives say they support. You heard the Prime Minister banging the drum again last week. But I say to him, look around Britain. Look at the bills working people are paying now. They're more expensive because you didn't build the gas storage. You didn't invest in clean British energy. You scrapped home insulation. And you're doing it all again, moving the targets back, passing it on to the next generation, letting the cost rise because you won't pay. Sticking plaster politics, an approach as riven through the foundations of our security as the crumbling concrete in our schools. The never-ending cycle of Tory Britain, party first, country second, drift, stagnate, decline. We have to turn the page on this conference. Government must steer the ship on industrial policy. That's a crucial part of any plan for growth. So here's our strategy. Step one, our National Wealth Fund, standing with business, ready to invest in the critical infrastructure that we need. The battery gigafactory, the clean British steel, the ports that can finally handle large industrial parks. More growth, more demand, more jobs. Step two, long-term stability for researchers, investors, innovators. A real boost for life sciences and the automotive industry. And a British jobs bonus that will attract new investment to our industrial heartlands, from Bridgend to Burnley, the backbone of Britain, once again powering us towards national renewal. Step three, a new direction on skills, because a future must be trained as well as built. And the generation that sacrificed so much during the pandemic, their potential must be backed. So today we commit to a new generation of colleges, technical excellent colleges, colleges with a stronger lead to their local economies, planted firmly in the ground of young people's aspirations, but also in the pride, the pull of the badge on your shirt, the ambition you feel when building a legacy for your community. Training lab workers in Derbyshire, automotive engineers in Wolverhampton, computer scientists in Manchester, nuclear technicians in Somerset, builders in Staffordshire, toolmakers in Hull. My dad would have loved that. And conference step four, a new mindset. Because when an opportunity is there to be won, you have to take it. Clean British energy is cheaper than foreign fossil fuels. That means cheaper bills for every family in the country. But conference, also a chance to make us more competitive. Countries like America are using this gift to create manufacturing jobs, the like of which we haven't seen for decades. And they're not the only ones. So when Rishi Sunak says, row back on our climate mission, I say, speed ahead. Speed ahead with investment. Speed ahead with 500,000 jobs. Speed ahead with great British energy. A new energy company that will harness clean British power for good British jobs. A company that will be publicly owned, conference, and will be based in Scotland. Because, conference, though Great British Energy will be a shared mission, Scotland has the skills, Scotland has the ingenuity, and Scotland is at the heart of a Britain built to last. That's what the people of Rutherglen voted for. And conference, I want to thank Anas for his inspiring leadership in that campaign and beyond, and Michael Shanks, who will serve his community with dignity, pride and determination. Michael. Conference, Scotland can lead the way to a Labour government, but be under no illusion. We must earn every vote. We must understand that the Scottish people are not just looking at us, they're also looking at Britain. The challenge of change remains. But nonetheless, for the first time in a long time, we can see a tide that is turning. 4 nations that are renewing. Old wounds of division, exploited by the Tories and the SNP, beginning to heal. So let the message from Rutherglen ring out across Britain. Labour serves working people in Scotland because Labour serves working people across all these islands. There's nothing more important. No distractions, no higher cause. That's who we stand for. What we stand for, our argument for Britain. An old partnership perhaps, but a flame now reignited to face a modern age of insecurity. A Britain once again united by the solidarity of working people, staring down the challenges of a more volatile world, fighting for our future together. And conference, it will be a fight. The SNP will regroup. Of course they will. Once again, they will wave away the lessons of history, try to present nationalism as a bridge to the world. We have to remind them it barely provide a ferry out of the Hebrides. As for the Tories, I have to warn you, a party that has so completely severed its relationship with the future, that is prepared to scorch the earth just to get at us, they will be dangerous. Trust me, wherever you think the line is, they've already got plans to cross it. But they'll be up for the fight. They're always up for the fight to save their own skins. And this isn't over. In fact, it's barely begun. So we have to be disciplined, focused, ready to fight back, and confident, conference, because we have come so far already. We've dragged this party back to service, and we can do the same for politics. I grew up working class. I've been fighting all my life, and I won't stop now. I've felt the anxiety of a cost of living crisis before, and until your family can see the way out, I will fight for you. That's my mission, and we will do it. We will face down the age of insecurity together. break the stranglehold of Tory decline, walk towards a decade of national renewal. Conference. Why Labour? Because we serve your interests. Why Labour? Because we will grow every corner of our country. Why Labour? Because we have a plan to take back our streets, switch on great British energy, get the NHS back on its feet, tear down the barriers to opportunity and get Britain building again. A plan for a Britain built to last, a plan to heal wounds, a plan to turn the page and say, in a cry of defiance to all those who now write our country off, Britain must, Britain can, Britain will get its future back. Thank you, Conference. Thank you, Conference. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Conference. Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Thank you, Conference. Thank you, Conference.
Well, applause there ringing out around the conference hall here in Liverpool as Sir Keir Starmer delivered his address. It started in interesting fashion, didn't it? He was glitter-bombed, as a little kiss from his wife there. He was glitter-bombed at the start by somebody who clearly had a bit of a gripe with the state of politics, but he dealt with that, he moved on. I think it took quite a while for that individual to actually be taken off the stage. Again, massive security concerns, but then we got into the substance of it. He kept saying Labour is the party of working people. He actually said outright that Labour supports a two-state solution in the Middle East when it comes to Israel and Palestine. He said that one of the things that really touched him recently was how many ordinary working people, he said, are in survival mode amid this cost of living crisis. And he wants to ease that burden, so he claims. A decade of national renewal. I think the eagle-eyed and eagle-eared, if you can be such a thing, amongst us will have realised that what he's saying is he's going to need at least 2 full terms just to try to correct the mess that we're in now, which does seem like a heck of a long time, but there we go. That's the line, isn't it, out of Labour? Look, we're in such a mess here, it's going to take us ages to get it right. The NHS, he said that working people are now paying for their own healthcare. Gave an example of a footballer who had ligament damage and then had to crowdfund £15,000 to actually get his career back on track before apparently scoring in the FA Cup. This would be funded largely anyway by the tax on non-doms. He says that Labour will reform the NHS. I think only the Labour Party can even talk about reforming the NHS, can't it? Because when the Tories do it, they just get a kicking. VAT on private schools, he mentioned that as well. He said that, look, the tax break for private schools, that needs to stop. And with that money, we can have things like mental health awareness and staff in other state schools. Home ownership. Now, that was conspicuous by its absence, wasn't it? The home ownership issue from Rishi Sunak's speech a week ago. Not so this time with Keir Starmer. He's pledged to build 1.5 million new homes and, I think I understood correctly anyway, a series of new towns, which might be a way of trying to make it slightly more palatable that they're going to tarmac over the green belt, but there we go. And clean British energy as well, being cheaper than foreign fossil fuels, finishing on a resounding clean energy drive there. So, lots to go at there. That was, of course, Sir Keir Starmer. I'm joined now by Olivia Utley, our political correspondent, and I think hopefully at some point soon we might be able to remind ourselves of that moment where Keir Starmer was glitter-bombed on stage. What do you make of that?
Well, I was in the hall for the glitter bombing moment, and it has to be said, Keir Starmer dealt with it very, very well indeed. As you said, I mean, that's a serious, serious security concern. And actually, I've noticed, and I've heard a lot of other people saying that at Labour conference this week, security has been a lot lighter than at Conservative conference last week. And apparently, that's simply because of funding issues, and the government of the day is funded much better than the opposition party of the day. Lots of people now saying that needs to change. Keir Starmer brushed the glitter off his shoulders, rolled up his sleeves, as we've seen him do many times before, and got on with it. Has to be said, I would say that is the best constructed and delivered speech that Keir Starmer has ever made, and it went down very, very well in the hall. Just like with Rachel Reeves the other day, we saw plenty of standing ovations. There was a lot of energy in the room. As for the substance of the speech, I mean, there wasn't a huge amount of new information there. He was covering quite a lot of old ground, and the message was very, very much what we have seen from Keir Starmer and from the whole of the Labour front bench for weeks and weeks now. It's not really ideological, it's about clearing up the mess that the Tories have created. As Rachel Reeves kept saying in her speech the other day, how have your family benefited from 13 years of Conservative power? That was a theme that Keir Starmer touched on again and again. Something which will probably play very, very well with particularly a lot of young people up and down the country is the house building angle. Keir Starmer making clear he doesn't want to tarmac over the green belt, but essentially he would allow a lot more planning, something which the Conservatives have ignored. Another example of Starmer stealing the Tories' clothing, if you like.
No, indeed. Look, let's just remind ourselves now of, we'll have a few clips of some of the actual substance, but naturally I'm going to start with a clip of the glitter bombing. So I think we can show you what happened now. This was right at the start of the speech here. There you go. Covered with glitter, and then that individual was saying, you know, politics is broken. We need a people's house. We need a people's house. Not entirely sure exactly what that was all about. Apparently someone has found this guy on Twitter, and I believe he has 16 whole followers. So he's making waves, that guy. What I did quite like, Olivia, is that in years to come, in decades to come, with no context whatsoever, people are going to look at a speech by the Labour leader, maybe the new Prime Minister, and go, why was he covered in glitter? They could have got it out of his hair, bless him, couldn't they? But there we go. Look, I think he dealt with it quite well. I'm going to go to Christopher Home now, who's our political editor, who again was in the hall with Olivia. I think we can take Christopher now. Christopher, Olivia's assessment... Oh, there we go. Still rapturous in there. Olivia's assessment was that she thinks it was the probably the best speech he's ever done. What do you make of it, the substance of it?
Well, Patrick, I think there wasn't a lot there which a Tory leader wouldn't have said. The only difference is this way of raising money on non-doms, people who are based here but don't pay tax here, or pay tax voluntarily, pay a charge, and the issue of private schools and removing their VAT status. Otherwise, it was simply a speech to reassure Tory voters, give us a chance. He made a direct plea to Tory voters to chance their arm with Labour, and there's nothing really to scare them away from doing that, because they're trying to offer this idea of he even said the word strong and stable government, which, don't forget, that was what Theresa May offered against the chaos of Labour under Jeremy Corbyn. They're going to literally reverse that position. So now Labour are offering strong and stable government against the chaos of the Tory party. Of course, there's risk there because that didn't end so well for Theresa May, did it? But we counted here 53 applauses, a dozen or so standing ovations, big claps for supporting Israel, big claps for cracking down on non-doms. I think there's a real feeling here of a party with momentum. But of course, it'll be in the small print. We don't yet know how they're going to raise money for lots of these policies, probably from borrowing, but we'll find out soon enough. But there's a feeling of excitement here, Patrick, in the hall.
Yeah, there may well be a feeling of excitement. There is a feeling of excitement, but have you not just got to the very core of it there, which is how are you actually going to pay for a lot of this stuff? I mean, is there any credibility? Is there an economic credibility gap, do you think, in the Labour Party?
Well, there's not a credibility gap. I think Rachel Reeves does pass the credibility test, not least when you have Mark Carney endorsing her in this hall just yesterday. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Patrick, and we at GBNews will keep asking how on earth are you going to pay for this, Keir Starmer? We don't know the answer to that. We know there is some money raised, as I say, from taking VAT off, adding it to private school bills, forgive me, and this non-dom tax, but that's not really enough for the scale of work they want to do. He talked here about these new garden cities to try and get Britain building again, new tech qualifications. I mean, it is very bold, but how they're going to pay for it is not yet answered by the Labour Party, by Starmer himself.
Yeah, indeed. And I'll just bring Olivia back into the fray now. Olivia Utley, our political correspondent. One of the big rounds of applause, really, was when he said, look, this party has changed now. We've got rid of anti-Semitism, we've got rid of a load of stuff. And you saw that was one of the kind of standing ovations that he got. I suppose there is a sense here that this is a different Labour.
It is absolutely remarkable. I mean, it can't be emphasised enough just how much the Labour Party does seem to have changed in the last 4 years. I was out and about interviewing people, delegates, yesterday, asking them if they stood with Israel. And all of them, I spoke to 10, all of them said yes, 100%. And of course, we've seen that echoed by first David Lammy and now Keir Starmer. If we had Jeremy Corbyn as the leader of the opposition, we would be seeing Free Palestine flags in the hall. We we might be seeing something similar to the scenes that we saw outside the Israeli embassy in London yesterday. Keir Starmer has taken big pains to sort of clean up the Labour Party. There are plenty of Labour MPs from Corbyn's day who are no longer MPs. There are lots of party members who've been kicked out of the party. And I think today, this conference, that's beginning to show fruit.
Yeah, one of the big things that he made a point of was the NHS, and I thought this is definitely one to watch. For a long time, I think a lot of people have thought, really, it would only be Labour who might be able to reform the NHS, because if the Tories try and do anything drastic, they'll get absolutely hammered. And lo and behold, Keir Starmer stands up there and he says, I know people don't like this word, reform. And then he went on to say that working people are paying for their own health care. He said that an individual tore his knee ligament, he's a semi-professional footballer, had to crowdfund £15,000 to basically choose between doing that or giving up his career. He said that, yeah, transform and reform the NHS, and that is supposedly going to be funded by non-DOMs. But again, I'm just not really sure that all adds up, does it?
Well, I think, as you say, it's really interesting that Keir Starmer talked about reforming the NHS. Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, said something similar a few months ago. And at the time, it was considered very, very brave indeed. The Labour Party hasn't talked about NHS reform in a long time. And as you say, as soon as the Tories bring it up, they're accused of privatising the NHS. It's just a sign of how far Labour have come that when Keir Starmer said that today, it was greeted with applause and wasn't really considered controversial at all. As you say, whether funding it by getting rid of non-DOM status will work is very interesting. The Labour Party seems to think the whole NHS reform can come from this non-DOM status, and if you look at their calculations, you can see how it works, but they don't seem to have allowed for the fact that plenty of non-DOMs would probably go back to...
They'll leave, right? Exactly. And I'm just having a look at some of these numbers now. So they think it will raise £3.2 billion, and this, as far as I can tell, comes from a study from the University of Warwick, which maybe they should be shouting a bit more about, that this is a university study that they are basing everything on, but fair enough. And according to this, there are the 500 wealthiest non-DOMs. Each of them would have to pay additional taxes of £6.4 million each in order to generate that £3.2 billion. So that's not necessarily going to happen, right? And I think it's important to note that is not necessarily going to happen. But Olivia, thank you very, very much. Olivia Rutley there, our political correspondent. I believe that joining me now, or very shortly, is the Labour Member of Parliament for Sheffield South. We're going to go to Clive very, very shortly. We are actually now going to go to a developing story, which is what's happening in Israel. So Israel forces and Hamas has threatened Israel's southern city of Ashkelon with a major rocket barrage and has warned residents to leave home by 5 p.m. local time. So that was 3 p.m. UK time. So the deadline that they've set. And as we go live there now, we can just see this second a massive explosion has just taken place, and a series of explosions are currently taking place. This is Gaza City that you're looking at now. Plumes of smoke rising into the sky. And as we can see that there are missiles raining down through the sky. Look, earlier the terror group Hamas declared that they will not negotiate whilst airstrikes in Gaza continue. And they have threatened to kill one captive for every Palestinian home bombed without warning. These, again, I want to remind you, are live images at the moment as explosions are continuing to take place. Latest reports in Israel say that the death toll from the Hamas attacks has reached 1,000 people. And Israeli retaliation has claimed the lives of almost 700 Palestinians. Charlie Peters joins me now. He's in Tel Aviv. We're going to keep these images up on the screen, but Charlie Peters will talk to us now from Tel Aviv. Charlie, thank you very, very much. So what's the latest then? It does seem like we are right now at a very crucial point where tensions, frankly bombs, are going to continue to go off.
Now, Israel has been cleared, the IDF believes, of Hamas militants, and they're now in a phase of reciprocal rocket and airstrike attacks. Now, Hamas warned at 3 p.m. local time that it would be hitting Ashkelon at 5 p.m, and it has followed through on its word, as you said. In the last 15 minutes, a huge barrage of rockets flying over from the Gaza Strip, and many of them hitting, it appears, Ashkelon. Over here in Tel Aviv, the air raid sirens have whirred into action several times in the last hour and a half. We've been taking shelter here, and we have heard the Iron Dome defence system, Israel's air defence system, taking up its actions and destroying rockets overhead. One explosion about an hour ago couldn't have been any more than a few kilometres away. Hamas has also claimed to have attacked the airport in the last hour and a half, and a town just 40 kilometres east of Gaza also reported airstrikes in the last hour. So very significant couple of hours for Hamas air efforts. Now, in Israel, of course, they have the Iron Dome defence system, but they are also, it appears, preparing for a ground assault. Troops are amassing on that southern border with the Gaza Strip as it clears out all remaining Hamas militants in the kibbutzes and the small farming communities that are there. But as they prepare to launch that likely ground assault in the next 24 to 48 hours, they're also contending with the very miserable experience of picking up the pieces of the destruction left by Hamas terrorists in those communities. People I've spoken to today have reported really just the most appalling stories as what has happened to their loved ones, many of their family members, many of their friends, some of whom are still missing, some are presumed dead, many, they know, have been captured. It is a horrifying ordeal, and as it all goes on, air raid sirens are likely to continue in Tel Aviv and across central and southern Israel over the next 12 hours.
Charlie, thank you very much. That's Charlie Peters there, who is out in Tel Aviv for us. You are looking at live images there from Gaza here now, which is currently on fire in a harbour area in Gaza. Possibly a fuel pipeline or something. It does appear certainly to have ignited and to be continuing to burn. Also, explosions reported in Ashkelon, which is where Hamas have threatened. In fact, just as we are talking, there was another explosion there. This is still Gaza, but it does look as though the Israelis are continuing to bombard this specific bit of it. As the camera does zoom out, I'm hoping that we might be able to see a little bit more of the destruction. But yes, it's worth noting that there are missiles in the sky as we speak, and Hamas warned Israel to essentially evacuate Ashkelon, which we can look at now. There we go. So that is Ashkelon, or a little bit of it anyway. Now this is the area where Hamas has said they're going to target, and I think we can see the traces there, can't we, of some fire which may have been intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome. There is some smoke billowing in the background there. Hamas have said that they are going to kill one captive for every Palestinian home bombed without warning, and the latest reports on the death toll from the Hamas attacks in Israel has reached 1,000 people, and the Israeli retaliation has claimed the lives of almost 700 Palestinians. So that is the footage there of Ashkelon, which we are expecting really is going to come under seriously increased fire in the coming hours. We will bring all of that to you, as much of it as we can take anyway. I think I'm just going to move on slightly now from what we can see here in Ashkelon, and we'll be going back to Charlie Peters at some point throughout the course of this show. Very concerning situations, a massive escalation in violence taking place in Israel and Gaza. I will have loads more to come for you before 4 p.m, including as well, whilst we keep these images on the screens here, including the UK divisions over the conflict in the Middle East, after thousands in London showed their support for Hamas and the Palestinian cause. I thought it was interesting that, look, as we look at these images here in Israel, that's Ashkelon, we'll show you some other ones from Gaza very shortly, and we'll keep crossing between them. It seems so far away, doesn't it? But clashes are happening right here in Britain. Clashes are happening outside the Israeli embassy in London. You've got people driving down Edgware Road in London. You've got people in Acton. You've got all these people waving the Palestinian flags. And it appears, showing support for what's going on in Israel. I believe we're going to go back now to Charlie Peters, who is in Tel Aviv for us. Charlie, what's the latest then? Is the onslaught continuing?
It appears to be more than just Ashkelon being targeted right now. This appears to be a complex IDF attack from the Hamas militants in the Gaza Strip. Reports in the last 10 minutes showing that the air raid sirens are whirring in northern Israel as well as near the West Bank. So clearly a coordinated, massive effort fired off by Hamas here. They have fired well over 4,500 rockets since Saturday. It's said that their arsenal stretches into the tens of thousands. So it's likely that we could see more of these complex attacks occurring in the future, especially in the next 12 hours. What's unique here, of course, is that they warned the citizens of Ashkelon that the strike was occurring. Usually in this conflict between those in Gaza and Israel, it's the Israelis who offer a warning, often very directly. But now it appears that the Hamas militants are doing the same so that citizens can leave Ashkelon and other areas.
OK, Charlie, thank you very much. Charlie Peters there, out in Tel Aviv. We're going to go back to Charlie. What he was saying there is that it does appear to be a seriously coordinated attack taking place. You are looking at scenes there from Gaza, massive explosions. We were showing you footage from Ashkelon earlier. Missiles were in the sky there. Many of them, thankfully, have not hit any targets. However, one would imagine that the barrage is going to continue. A huge escalation in violence in Gaza, Palestine and Israel. But loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. I am going to be talking about whether or not we should be concerned as a nation that we're seeing some of this drama and militant tendency overflowing here on the streets. We are also going to have a look at what Keir Starmer actually said in his conference speech. Beyond the glitter bomb, there was quite a lot in there, a heck of a lot in there, about the NHS, about home building, and about what kind of leader he wants to be, trying to portray a sense that Labour is a genuine, honest party for working people with a sense of decency at its core. That's what Keir Starmer, of course, will want us to make sure that the takeaway is. Patrick Christie's here at GB News. I'll see you in a sec.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute.